Chapter 65. However, by the time Yuan Dao spoke, it was already too late. Just as he spoke, Yi Xing's leg had already landed on Yu Weining's body. Bang! Yu Weining's body, which had been retreating in the air, suddenly changed direction and fell straight down. He landed heavily on the ground with a loud bang. The force of the impact was too terrifying. The hard floor beneath Yu Weining's body instantly shattered and spiderweb-like cracks appeared. As for Yu Weining, he had first been attacked by Yi Xing's leg and then landed heavily on the ground. Even though he was a level 6 martial artist who had refined his inner strength into his skin, he could not withstand the impact. He was severely injured and spat out a large mouthful of blood. After that kick, Yi Xing did not attack Yu Weining ruthlessly again. The previous kick was because Yuan Dao had spoken too late, so it was still acceptable. Now that Yuan Dao had already called for him to stop, if Yi Xing attacked again, it would not only be maliciously attacking an elder, it would also be disrespecting the clan leader. Even though he was the top elite disciple, the clan could not tolerate him without any bottom line. Yi Xing landed lightly on the ground. He ignored Yu Weining, who was lying on the ground and spitting out blood. Instead, he cupped his fists and said to Yuan Dao. This disciple did not hold back in time and injured elder Yu Weining. Clan leader, please punish me. Although his words were tactful, all the martial artists present found it strange when they heard it. To be able to become an elder in the clan, seniority alone was not enough. One also needed great strength. A junior disciple had accidentally injured an elder in the clan. This was simply a fantasy. However, in Yi Xing's case, this had become a reality. A child had competed with an adult, but in the end, he had injured the adult. How was this child to be punished? As a junior in the clan, Yi Xing was like a child in front of Yu Weining. And Yu Weining was the adult in front of the child. No matter what, this matter was a loss of face for the adults. They could only blame the adults for not living up to expectations. How could they blame the children for injuring them? Although that was the case, Yi Xing heavily injured Yu Weining, which made the elders of the family very unhappy. After all, Yu Weining was an elder of the family and represented the elders of the Yi clan. Yu Weining being ruthlessly beaten up by Yi Xing not only caused him to lose face, but also caused the other elders of the family to lose face. Therefore, 9 out of 10 elders in the family did not like Yi Xing, and more than half of them were very angry with Yi Xing. In particular, some of the family elders who had a good relationship with Yi Xing were even more furious and angrily rebuked Yi Xing. What a vicious brat. How dare he beat up a clan elder in public? How arrogant. Too arrogant. This is simply lawless. If we don't punish such an arrogant person, what rules do we have in the Yi clan? This lad has no respect for his elders and is vicious and merciless. If he can do this to Elder Weining today, he will trample on the elders of the other families in the future. Faced with the angry rebukes of the family elders, Yi Xing's expression was normal and his heart was as calm as water. He did not panic in the slightest. Although he had been vicious to Yu Weining, he did not go too far. When Yuan Dao spoke, he stopped and did not go against Yuan Dao's authority. At this moment, the Zishan Academy was recruiting students. The family needed powerful elites of the younger generation to represent the family in the recruitment competition. As long as Yuan Dao prioritized the family, he would not punish Yi Xing, who clearly did not do anything wrong. Coincidentally, Yuan Dao was a patriarch who prioritized the family. Yi Xing was very sure that Yuan Dao would not punish him severely for injuring Yu Weining in the duel. Yi Xing's gaze swept across the elders who had rebuked him and loudly said, "Disciple and elder Yu Weining had a fair duel. Disciple did not use any tricks, poison, or underhanded tricks. I won the duel with my true strength. What rules did I break?" Elder Yu Weining was injured by disciple because his skills were not as good as mine. Other than proving that his strength is too useless, what else can it prove? Pu Yi Weining, who had just stabilized his internal energy and was being helped up by Elder Yuan Tian, was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood and almost fell to the ground. His old face had been slapped into nothingness by Yi Xing. As for the elders who had rebuked Yi Xing, they were all furious. Their faces and necks were red with anger. Enough. Yuan Dao waved his hand and stopped the elders who were about to go crazy. He said, Yi Xing is right. In this duel, he did not use any tricks, poison, or underhanded tricks. He won fair and square with his true strength. Elder Weining was injured because his skills were not as good as his opponent. You cannot blame Yi Xing, the patriarch's position and power were above the elders. When Yuan Dao said this, the elders who were about to go crazy from anger shut their mouths and swallowed their anger. Yi Xing smiled faintly in his heart. Yuan Dao's attitude was within his expectations. However, Yuan Dao did not finish his words. His tone changed as he said, however, Elder Weining is still an elder of the family. Yi Xing did not accidentally injure him. He did it on purpose. It is indeed disrespectful to the elders and disrespectful. Yuan Dao's words made the elders who had been swallowing their anger brighten. They also received the approval of all the elders of the family. After all, Yi Xing's arrogance in front of the elders had indeed made them feel disgusted. They felt that Yi Xing should be punished. Yuan Dao continued, it's unavoidable for young people to be arrogant. If Yi Xing's strength is indeed outstanding, and he was able to obtain outstanding results in the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition, then let him be arrogant for a while. However, if he is defeated by Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin, it means that he does not have the strength to look down on all the younger generation in Celestial Azure City. If he cannot even look down on the heroes of the younger generation, then his disrespect to the elders of the family is a little too arrogant. After this, he will have to apologize to Elder Yi Weining. The patriarch's words are reasonable. An elder agreed. Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin had been in the 6th stage of the martial path for almost a year. Their current cultivation was at least in the middle stage of the 6th stage, or even in the late stage of the 6th stage. Yi Weining's strength was naturally far superior to Yi Yunlong's, who had just stepped into the 6th stage of the martial path. However, he was not necessarily stronger than Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin. After all, Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin had been in the 6th stage of the martial path for quite some time. A year ago, they already had very high attainments in their martial arts. Now, their attainments would only be higher. They might even have cultivated a mid-grade martial art to perfection. Moreover, Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin were both geniuses that the family focused on nurturing. They might even be able to learn high-grade martial arts. Incomplete high-grade martial arts were very difficult to cultivate. Even Yi Weining, who had been cultivating for decades, had not cultivated a single high-grade martial art. This was because the Ya family's high-grade martial arts were all incomplete. However, the Xiong family had a complete high-grade martial art. Gu Yijin's father, the Celestial Azure City's city lord, also knew high-grade martial arts. There was an 80 to 90% chance that he would pass it down to Gu Yijin. Once Xiong Qifeng and Gu Yijin grasped high-grade martial arts, their strength should be above Yi Weining. With regards to Yi Xing's words, all the family elders agreed. If Yi Xing could defeat Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin, then he would be the number one in Celestial Azure City's younger generation. There would be a high chance that he would be recruited into the Purple Mountain Academy's gifted class. The Ya family would also be able to hold their heads up high in the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition. If that was the case, then Yi Xing's disrespect towards Yi Weining would be a small matter. Being checkmated by Yi Xing was a little unexpected. It seemed that this family head was not simple. He did things flawlessly, leaving no loopholes for Yi Xing to exploit. Fortunately, Yi Xing was 100% confident that he could defeat Gu Yijin and Xiong Qifeng. Among the younger generation of Celestial Azure City, the only one he saw as a worthy opponent was Wei Qingxian. As the family head commands. Yixing nodded slightly and said confidently. Yuan Dao nodded at Yixing. The latter's confidence made him value him even more. Today's grand competition will end here. Yixing, you have 10 hours to learn high-grade martial arts on the 3rd level of the martial pavilion. I will adjust the time to 5 days. After 5 days, the Purple Mountain Academy's experts will come to Celestial Azure City to recruit students. The difficulty of learning an incomplete high-grade martial arts is extremely high, but you are a martial arts genius. I hope you can learn one so that you will have more confidence in facing Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin. Although to Yixing, there was no difference between 10 hours and 5 days on the 3rd level of the martial pavilion, Yixing was still very happy with Yuan Dao's adjustment. Yixing cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, family head. This disciple has something to report to you." Everyone looked at Yixing, not knowing what he was going to say to the family head. Yixing nodded. Yixing said, "This disciple met with danger in the Green Cloud Mountains, but managed to turn the misfortune into a blessing. I found some blood dike. My bronze incantation was cultivated to the perfection stage after consuming the blood dike. I brought the extra 10 blood dike out and offered them to the family." Yixing had 30 blood dike on him, but he couldn't hand them all over to the family. The blood dike was his personal belongings. He handed over 10 to the family because Yixing treated him well. Otherwise, Yixing wouldn't have taken them out. As for the other 20 blood dike, Yixing had people he wanted to help. Naturally, he would keep some with him. Blood dike, high-grade medicinal herb blood dike. As soon as Yixing's voice fell, many martial artists cried out in surprise. High-grade medicinal herbs were extremely precious. Yixing actually had 10 blood dike on him. How could the martial artists not be surprised? Who knew how many junior disciples, and even the elders of the family, coveted those 10 blood dams? At the same time, they were incomparably envious of Yixing. To cultivate the bronze incantation to the perfection stage, how many blood dike did he eat? At this moment, Yuan was also filled with joy. He said, "Blood dike. Good, good. Yixing, you are actually willing to take out such precious medicinal herbs to offer to the family. I have really underestimated you before. You have the Ya family in your heart. Whether or not you beat Xiong Qifeng and Gui Jin in the recruitment competition, today's matter will be forgotten. Xiong Qifeng, Gui Jin. I will definitely beat them." Yixing smiled indifferently and said in his heart. He didn't say it out loud. When he was changing his clothes, he had already divided the blood dike into 2 portions. He took out 10 blood dike and gave it to Yuan Dao. Yixing's offering of 10 blood dike to the family changed many people's views of him. Other than the few family elders who were close friends with Yixing, no one had any prejudice against Yixing because of Yu Weiniang's matter. I have arrived at Shenyang. Starting tomorrow, I will resume 2 updates a day. I will continue to write now. After midnight, there will be the first update tomorrow. The recommendation votes have decreased, please give me 1. Chapter 66. Celestial City. Ya family's martial pavilion, 3rd floor. This was the most important place in the Yi clan. Even the elders of the Yi clan had a time limit and were not allowed to enter as they wished. At this moment, Yixing was on the 3rd floor of the martial pavilion, reading martial arts manuals. The martial pavilion elder Yi Wendian was beside him. There were not many martial arts manuals on the 3rd floor of the martial pavilion, only 7. One of them was an upper-grade cultivation technique called Qingyuan art. Another was an upper-grade cultivation technique called silver body technique. 3 upper-grade martial arts techniques called heavenly extinguishing finger, thousand shadows fist, and lifeless sword art. One was an upper-grade movement technique called 4 directional steps. One was an upper-grade movement technique called Traceless Snowflake. These 7 martial arts were all upper-grade, and without exception, they were all incomplete. Yixing already knew the origin of these 7 upper-grade martial arts. They all came from the Purple Mountain Institute. Generations of geniuses from the Yi clan who entered the Purple Mountain Institute learned upper-grade martial arts from the institute. After returning to Celestial City, they wrote the upper-grade martial arts manuals based on their understanding of martial arts. Because the upper-grade martial arts they learned were not complete, they could not write the complete upper-grade martial arts manuals. Every one of them was incomplete. In order to complete these 7 martial arts manuals, the geniuses from the Yi clan who entered the Purple Mountain Institute learned all the upper-grade martial arts manuals in these 7 martial arts manuals. However, the requirement of high-level martial arts was too high. Yi clan only had one genius, Yi Tianjue, 100 years ago, who had cultivated the Qingyuan art to the Great Completion realm. In the end, Yi Tianjue had cultivated to the Great Completion realm, and he had cultivated the Heavenly Finger to the Great Completion realm. During Yi Tianjue's era, the Yi clan was at its peak. They were the #1 martial arts family in Celestial City. Because of Yi Tianjue's improvements, Qingyuan art and Heavenly Extinguishing Finger were relatively more complete. Yixing first looked at the Qingyuan art. The Qingyuan art in the secret manual could be cultivated by opening 10 meridians. It was the same as the Xian Qing art that Yixing had improved, but it was of little value. This was because the Xian Qing skill could directly open up 10 meridians for cultivation, while the Qingyuan skill could only open up 10 meridians when it was cultivated to the Great Accomplishment realm. Otherwise, only 8 meridians could be opened at the entry realm, and only 9 meridians could be opened at the minor accomplishment realm. Actually, the complete Qingyuan art required more than just 10 meridians to be opened. Even the entry level could open 10 meridians. However, the Yi clan's Qingyuan art was incomplete. Thus, not only was the efficiency low, it was also extremely difficult to cultivate. Yixing scanned the contents of Qingyuan's skill into his superbrain, and soon, he made a shocking discovery. Compared to other people's incomplete Qingyuan art, he could actually understand it. Furthermore, the superbrain was still perfecting the missing parts of Qingyuan art. Not long after, Qingyuan's skill became a complete upper-class technique that could be cultivated by opening up 12 meridians. The reason for this was directly related to Yixing's martial arts knowledge. Yixing's superbrain was too powerful. In terms of martial arts theory, it was not weaker than a martial arts master. In terms of deduction, it was far better than a martial arts master. Yixing had only cultivated the evergreen art and Xian Qing art. However, he had read all the cultivation techniques in the Yi clan's martial pavilion. Whether it was the lower class or upper class cultivation techniques, Yixing had read them all and memorized them in his superbrain. Not only would he never forget them, but his superbrain also understood all the principles behind the cultivation techniques. This greatly enhanced Yixing's martial arts knowledge. Martial arts masters could recite a few lower class or middle class cultivation techniques, but they might not be able to explain the complete principles behind the cultivation techniques. However, Yixing could. Yixing had turned every cultivation technique into his own knowledge. Not only did he know them, but he could also understand the principles behind them. The superbrain had such a powerful function that it could complete the deduction of martial arts. From Yixing's point of view, Qingyuan's skill was not incomplete. The basic cultivation technique was still there. It only lacked the knowledge to teach people to understand it. Upper-class martial arts were much more difficult than middle-class martial arts. It was unlike middle-class martial arts, where anyone with a certain level of comprehension could learn the secret manual by themselves. Upper-class martial arts could not be learned by oneself if one did not have a high level of comprehension. This was because they could not understand it at all. Therefore, not only did they need the cultivation technique, but they also needed the cultivation experience to impart. This kind of martial arts could only be learned by a master. Otherwise, it would be extremely difficult to learn if one only had the secret manual without the cultivation experience left behind by their predecessors. The upper-class martial arts of the Yi clan did not lack the cultivation technique, but the cultivation experience of their predecessors. In fact, the cultivation technique was not that incomplete. Yi Xing's biggest advantage over other martial arts practitioners was his superbrain's self-learning advantage. The superbrain could verify and deduce the correct cultivation method based on the principles of other martial arts, allowing Yi Xing to know how to cultivate. Yi Xing could learn things that normal martial arts practitioners could not learn without the guidance of a master. Qin Yuan's skill was like that. Even Yi Tianjue, who had cultivated Qin Yuan's skill to perfection 100 years ago, did not necessarily have a deeper understanding of Qin Yuan's skill than Yi Xing. Therefore, Yi Tianjue's Qin Yuan art, which he wrote based on his own cultivation experience, still had some flaws. Yi Xing's superbrain, on the other hand, made up for the flaws by deducing the principles of other martial arts. However, when Yi Xing flipped to the last page of the Qin Yuan skill manual, he realized that his perfected Qin Yuan skill was not complete. The last page recorded that a perfected Qin Yuan skill had a total of 6 stages. The first 3 stages increased the number of meridians opened, and the last 3 stages increased the quality of inner strength. Yi Xing's perfected Qin Yuan skill was only at the 3rd stage. If he succeeded in cultivating it, he could open 12 meridians. However, it was not enough to increase the quality of inner strength. If he wanted to perfect Qin Yuan skill, Yi Xing's current knowledge of martial arts was not enough. He had to go to Mount Indigo Academy to learn more martial arts. Moreover, the complete Qin Yuan skill manual was in Mount Indigo Academy. Yi Xing put down the Qin Yuan skill manual. He was very satisfied. Although he did not get the complete Qin Yuan skill manual, just the part he got was enough to open 12 meridians. It was much stronger than his own Shanqin skill. Yi Xing then picked up the Silver Body Technique manual and read it. It was the same as Qin Yuan's skill. In fact, the Silver Body Technique was more complete. However, there were very few cultivation experiences. Even if the Yi clan's martial artists had a cultivation technique, they would not be able to understand it. Therefore, it felt very incomplete. The superbrain also deduced the Silver Body Technique based on the knowledge of the body refining skill and perfected it. Yi Xing's body still had remnants of the blood dam's medicinal effects. The newly learned Qin Yuan skill and Silver Body Technique could increase the speed of absorbing these remnants of medicinal effects. Presumably, his cultivation and physical strength would increase rapidly for a period of time. Sky Extinguishing Finger, Thousand Shadow Fist, Lifeless Sword Technique, Four-Sided Steps, Traceless Flying Snow. Yi Xing read through all the martial arts manuals one by one. Yi Wendian wanted to remind Yi Xing that the most important thing in martial arts was the quality, not the quantity. The difficulty of cultivating high-grade martial arts was extremely high, especially the incomplete ones. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was not easy to cultivate even one type. There were only 5 days left until the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition. Do not read this and read that. Only by reading one type and learning one type would there be a possibility of mastering it. However, when he thought of the first time Yi Xing entered the martial pavilion, he reminded him of this. However, Yi Xing obviously did not listen to him and learned many martial arts. In the end, many of them were cultivated to the perfection stage. Therefore, Yi Wendian swallowed the words that were about to come out of his throat. He thought to himself, maybe I really don't understand the world of martial arts geniuses. After the super brain's deduction, Yi Xing gained a lot of benefits. He was certain that as long as he was given enough time, he would be able to cultivate all 7 high-grade martial arts. Moreover, his attainment in them would not be low. However, there were only 5 days left until the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition. No matter how fast the super brain learned martial arts, he would not be able to learn all 7 martial arts before then. Yixing pondered for a moment and decided to focus on the 1,000 shadow fist first. The super brain was the most helpful to the cultivation of martial arts. Moreover, Yixing majored in fist and leg techniques. Therefore, the 1,000 shadow fist was the most suitable choice. Yixing, you can stay on the 3rd floor of the martial pavilion for the next 5 days. Why are you leaving so soon? Elder Yi Wendian could not help but ask when he saw that Yixing was about to leave the martial pavilion after reading through all 7 manuals once. Yixing smiled faintly. He tapped his head with his index finger and said, I have already memorized how to cultivate them. What I need to do next is practice. After leaving the martial pavilion, Yixing returned to his residence. For the next 5 days, he would be in seclusion to cultivate the 1,000 shadow fist. Chapter 67. Arriving at the courtyard, Yifeng was practicing the perfect bone burst fist. Yifeng was now a 4th stage martial artist and had received guidance from Yixing. His martial arts foundation was solid and his attainments were relatively high. Normal 4th stage martial artists would find it difficult to be his opponent. Chopping firewood was no longer a challenge for Yifeng. He finished the day's work in less than half a day. Because of Yixing's return, he came to Yixing's place to practice. Yixing waved at him. Yifeng immediately stopped and ran over. He said excitedly, Brother Xing, you're back from the martial pavilion so soon. Yixing nodded and took out a blood dike and handed it to Yifeng. Blood dike. Yifeng's eyes lit up as he exclaimed. That's right. I gave 10 blood dike to the family and kept some on me. I'll give you 5. There are still a few left. When you return to Qingye village, bring them to my parents and your father. Yixing handed the blood dike to Yifeng and patted his shoulder. Come to my place for the next few days. I'll give you 1 blood dike every day. Yifeng was a disciple chopping firewood in the cafeteria. Yixing would never give 10 blood dike to the family. Therefore, although Yixing had 30 blood dike on him, he only gave 10 to the family. He had already decided on how to distribute the remaining 20. 5 for Yifeng, 5 for Yi Fighting, and 5 for each of his parents. Whether it was for their cultivation or for their body refining technique, it was very useful. The blood dike's medicinal power was strong. Yifeng hadn't even reached great accomplishment in his body refining technique, so Yixing didn't dare to let him eat more. 1 blood dike a day was enough. Brother Xing, the blood dike is so precious. Although Yifeng was very excited, he was a little embarrassed to accept such a precious item. Yixing waved his sleeve and said, You're a real man, don't be so shy. We are brothers, and I've already eaten a lot of blood dikes. Continuing to eat won't have much effect, it would be a complete waste. If one ate too many of the same medicinal herb, the body would develop a resistance to it. Yixing had eaten more than 30 blood dike seeds in one go. He could slowly absorb the medicinal effects that had already been refined, but if he ate more, the effects would be greatly reduced. Hearing Yixing's words, Yifeng no longer hesitated and said gratefully, Thank you, Brother Xing. Yixing smiled. The blood dam was of a very high level to Yifeng. With 5 blood dams, not only would he be able to cultivate his low-grade body refinement technique to perfection, but he would also be able to cultivate his mid-grade body refinement technique to large success. Moreover, Yixing had eaten more than 30 blood dikes. His cultivation had soared from the early 5th level to the late 5th level, while Yifeng was only at the early 4th level. Even though the amount of blood dikes he had eaten was only 1/6 of what Yixing had eaten, the amount of energy required to increase his cultivation was only 1/10 of what Yixing had eaten. It could be seen that Yifeng had eaten 5 blood dikes at the early 4th level. The increase in his cultivation was even greater than that of Yixing, who had eaten more than 30 blood dikes at the early 5th level. He would probably soon reach the peak of the 4th level. Although the peak of the 4th level was not enough to become an elite disciple, he would definitely be of first-class existence among the ordinary disciples. He could definitely enter the top 10 ordinary disciples. As for the top 10 ordinary disciples, even if Yi Weining purposely put Yi Feng in a bad place, he would not be allowed to continue chopping wood in the dining hall. He would definitely be transferred to the martial arts hall to focus on cultivation. As a result, Yi Feng would have more time to cultivate. Moreover, he had received Yi Xing's teachings and guidance, establishing a solid foundation for cultivation. Especially since he was 1 year younger than Yi Xing, he had great potential and would definitely achieve great things in the future. Yi Xing was basically certain that he would be recruited by the Purple Mountain Academy. Soon, he would leave Celestial Azure City and head to Purple Mountain County. Therefore, he would help Yi Feng if he could. If Yi Feng could achieve great things in the future, Yi Xing would also be very happy. A satisfied smile hung on his face. He patted Yi Feng's shoulder and said, "All right, eat the blood dike seeds now and then refine and absorb them. I also want to cultivate my martial skills, so don't disturb me." "Okay." Yi Feng nodded excitedly. He ran to the side of the courtyard and sat cross-legged. He was not in a hurry to eat the blood dike seeds. Instead, he first meditated and calmed his qi. Yi Xing sat on the ground as well. His method of cultivation was different from that of ordinary people. First, he had to simulate cultivation in his super brain. Once his spiritual consciousness had reached perfection in the martial arts, he would then practice cultivation. High-grade martial skills were extremely difficult to cultivate. Although compared to others, Yi Xing could easily cultivate a high-grade martial skill, it still required a certain amount of time. Every day, Yi Xing spent 90% of his time meditating. He used his super brain to simulate a human figure and cultivate it in his spiritual world. He only used less than 10% of his time to practice cultivation. Because Yi Xing's spiritual consciousness had not been cultivated to perfection, he could only feel the dynamic changes of the martial arts when he cultivated. It was mainly used to comprehend the spiritual aspect. Only when his spiritual consciousness had reached perfection in the Thousand Shadows Fist, Yi Xing would need to spend a large amount of time on practical cultivation. Day by day, time passed. Every day, Yi Xing would give Yi Feng a blood dike seed. Yi Feng's improvement was shocking. In just 4 days, Yi Feng's cultivation had reached late-stage 4th stage. Moreover, his low-grade body refining technique had reached perfection. Even his middle-grade body refining technique was about to reach perfection. In these 4 days, Yi Xing also made progress. After the super brain accelerated the simulation cultivation by hundreds and thousands of times, Yi Xing's spiritual consciousness had reached perfection in the Thousand Shadows Fist. Only his body was still a little uncoordinated. When he executed the Thousand Shadows Fist, he could not synchronize it with his spiritual consciousness. The body was controlled by the spiritual consciousness. As long as his spiritual consciousness reached perfection, and with practice cultivation, Yi Xing's Thousand Shadows Fist would reach perfection sooner or later. The 5th day. Yi Xing had only practiced for a day, but he had already cultivated the Thousand Shadows Fist to the realm of great success. If the other warriors of the Yi clan were to know of this speed, their eyes would definitely pop out of their sockets. Many elders had practiced high-grade martial arts for 10 years, or even dozens of years, but they could not even reach the entry level. With Yi Xing's talent, he might not be considered a martial arts prodigy, but with his super brain, he was definitely one of the best and most monstrous martial arts prodigies. His cultivation speed would not lose to any other martial arts prodigies. In the evening, Yi Xing finished practicing a set of Thousand Shadows Fist and exhaled. With a whoosh, the qi shot out like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, it shot out dozens of feet away with a piercing sound. It could be seen that the qi arrow was not slow and had a certain degree of lethality. Although Yi Xing had mainly been practicing the Thousand Shadows fist for the past 5 days, he had occasionally practiced the Qingyuan skill as well. Most of the medicinal effects of the blood dam in his body had been refined, and his cultivation had improved by quite a bit. He was only a little bit away from the peak of level 5. He had opened up 12 meridians. The inner strength in his body was very abundant. Therefore, the force of his breath was like an arrow, far exceeding that of a normal person. If it was a martial disciple, they would not be able to withstand Yi Xing's breath. Yi Xing looked at Yi Feng, who was practicing the perfect bone-exploding fist. The latter had also just finished practicing. Yi Xing asked, "Yi Feng, how's your progress?" Yi Feng was very happy. He excitedly said, "Fast. Too fast. I have never improved so quickly. The bronze tactics have already reached the large success realm. My cultivation is not far from the peak of 4th stage. It should be in the next 2 days." Yi Xing nodded in satisfaction. Yi Feng's progress was within his expectations. He said, "Your cultivation in the 4th stage has increased very quickly. In the future, you have to spend more time practicing martial arts and consolidate it." I will." Yi Feng's eyes lit up as he said, "Brother Xing, have you mastered the upper-grade martial technique?" Although Yi Xing was practicing the Thousand Shadow Fist at the side, Yi Feng could not see the attainment of the upper-grade martial technique. He only knew that Yi Xing's punches were very fast, almost dazzling. The corners of Yi Xing's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile on his face as he lightly nodded. Yi Feng's eyes shone even brighter, almost turning into a resplendent light. He said excitedly, "Even many elders have not been able to cultivate the upper-grade martial skill. Brother Xing, you actually managed to cultivate it in just a few days." "Ha! I knew it, I knew it. Brother Xing, you are simply omnipotent. You are too awesome." Yi Feng was too excited. His heart was pounding. As he spoke, he was almost incoherent. Yi Xing only smiled faintly. In Yi Feng's opinion, being able to master an upper-grade martial technique was already very impressive. However, Yi Xing's attainment in the Thousand Shadow Fist was far from just mastering it. It was not at the entry stage, nor was it at the small success stage. It was far beyond the small success stage, almost reaching the large success stage. Even for a 7th stage martial Dao master, being able to master an upper-grade martial technique to Yi Xing's level was as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. A upper-grade martial technique. Yi Xing had already mastered it, and was even close to the large success stage. What would those elders who had cultivated their entire lives without being able to reach the entry stage think? They would have to cover their faces when they walk in the future. Hee. The Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition is about to begin. Among the younger generation of Tiansang City, who will be the hero? Let's wait for the next round. Brothers, for Yi Xing's rise, please vote for him. The excitement is about to begin. Chapter 68. The day of the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment finally arrived. Early in the morning, Yi Yunlong, Yi Yundai, and the rest of the top 10 elite disciples gathered at the main hall of the Yi clan. They were the younger generation of the Yi clan who were going to participate in the recruitment competition. They would be led by Patriarch Yi Wendao and several other elders to the location of the competition. As for the other disciples, they could also go to watch the competition. They would be led by other elders and would not have to travel with Yi Xing and the rest. Senior Yi Xing. When Yi Xing arrived at the main hall of the Yi clan, Yi Yunlong was the first to greet Yi Xing. Yi Yunlong looked refreshed. The dispirited look he had 5 days ago at the elite disciple competition had completely disappeared. Yi Xing's words that day were like a wake-up call to Yi Yunlong. Yi Yunlong had always been grateful to Yi Xing. Therefore, even though Yi Yunlong was the former number 1 of the younger generation of the Yi clan, he did not lose face. Instead, he sincerely called Yixing Senior. Senior Yixing. Senior Yixing. Even Yi Yunlong took the initiative to call Yixing Senior. The other top 10 elite disciples naturally could not ignore Yixing. They all started to call out to him. However, their expressions were different. Some were impressed by Yixing and sincerely called Yixing Senior. There were also some who were unwilling but had to do so. Among them, the one with the most complicated expression was Yi Yunwan. When Yixing was just a disciple carrying water in the cafeteria, Yi Yunwan had already paid attention to him because of his challenge to Yi Yunkong. She looked at him in a different light and secretly had feelings for him. At that time, Yi Yunwan was still acting like a senior sister. Even though she had feelings for Yixing, her pride made her unwilling to tell Yixing. She only revealed her feelings through her usual actions, hoping that after Yixing understood, he would take the initiative to pursue her. However, although Yixing understood Yi Yunwan's feelings, he didn't have any plans to talk about love with Yi Yunwan. He only focused on martial arts. Time flowed by. In the blink of an eye, Yixing had already become the #1 junior of the Yi clan. His ranking had already surpassed Yi Yunwan's, and his strength far surpassed hers. In the past, Yi Yunwan did not dare to tell Yixing her feelings because of her pride. Now that she was facing Yixing again, the honor of being a senior sister had disappeared. Looking at Yixing, who had become the #1 junior, she felt a little inferior. His gaze was filled with melancholy, regret, hesitation, and finally sighing. All sorts of emotions were mixed together. Brother Yunlong, junior brothers, and junior sisters. Yixing walked forward and nodded slightly to the elite disciples. Then, he stood beside Yi Yunlong and chatted with him. Brother Yunlong, you look spirited. Your strength seems to have improved compared to 5 days ago. Yi Yunlong smiled slightly and revealed a carefree expression. He said, compared to senior brother Yixing, I still have a long way to go. The two of them didn't talk much before Yi Wendao and a few elders walked out from the back room. Yixing and Yi Yunlong stopped talking, and so did the other disciples who were talking. Yi Wendao walked in front of Yixing and the rest and stopped. A few elders stopped one step earlier and stood to the side. Yi Wendao's gaze swept across the top 10 elite disciples one by one. His gaze lingered on Yixing for an extra moment before he said, the Purple Mountain Academy recruits students once every 3 years. Every year, only 10 students will be accepted from the Azure Sky City. Last year, only 2 from the Yi clan entered the Purple Mountain Academy, while the Wei clan had 3. Not only did the Xiong clan have 3 people enter the Purple Mountain Academy's ordinary class, one of them even entered the genius class. Among the 3 great clans, the Yi clan was last. This year, I don't want the Yi clan to be last among the 3 clans again. All of you must work hard and do your best to obtain a good ranking in the recruitment competition. We will do our best. Yixing and the rest replied in unison. Yi Wendao nodded with a satisfied expression. Compared to 3 years ago, the Yi clan's junior elites participating in the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition were indeed more outstanding. The Purple Mountain Academy only accepts geniuses below the age of 20. Therefore, all the martial clans within the Purple Mountain Prefecture would classify those below the age of 20 as junior disciples. Among the top 10 elite disciples, there might be some who would participate in the recruitment competition twice in a row, but there wouldn't be a situation where they didn't comply with the rules because of their age. Yi Wendao continued, when Duke Tianjue was still alive, the Yi clan was the #1 martial clan in Azure Sky City. However, ever since Duke Tianjue passed away, the Yi clan has repeatedly declined and was even surpassed by the Xiong clan. The reason is that ever since Duke Tianjue passed away, the Yi clan has always had fewer students entering the Purple Mountain Academy than the Xiong clan. In the Purple Mountain Academy, there are upper-grade martial arts and even supreme-grade martial arts. You all know the benefits of becoming a student of the Purple Mountain Academy. Therefore, now that there is an opportunity, you all must seize it. If the Yi clan wants to surpass the Xiong clan, it must start with the number of people entering the Purple Mountain Academy. This time, you all must surpass the Xiong clan. Otherwise, those who are not accepted by the Purple Mountain Academy will be severely punished by the clan. These words caused the hearts of the lower-ranked elite disciples to skip a beat. The patriarch didn't fly into a rage easily, but once he did, it would definitely be terrifying. Since the patriarch had said it in front of them, it definitely wasn't empty words. If they didn't perform well in the Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition, they might really be severely punished. The Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment quota was limited. Azure Sky City only had 10 quotas. Those participating in the recruitment competition were not only the Yi, Wei, and Xiong martial clans, but also the City Lord's residents and the entire Azure Sky City's junior elites. It was impossible for the Yi clan to take up all 10 quotas. Therefore, the lower-ranked elite disciples definitely wouldn't be able to become students of the Purple Mountain Academy. They could only hope that Yi Xing and the others who were ranked at the top would perform well and defeat their opponents, rushing into the top 10 of the recruitment competition and surpassing the Xiong clan. Only then would they be able to avoid a severe punishment. After Yi Wendao finished speaking, his gaze fell on Yi Xing and he asked, "Yi Xing, I heard from Elder Wendian that you only stayed at the 3rd level of the Martial Pavilion for 2 hours and didn't go back. Elder Wendian said that you have a photographic memory and have already memorized all the upper-grade martial arts of the 3rd level. How is your cultivation now?" Although Yi Wendao asked this question, his emotions didn't fluctuate too much. Clearly, in his heart, he felt that this question was pointless. Although Yi Xing was a martial arts prodigy, the difficulty of cultivating an incomplete upper-grade martial art was too high. If it had been a long time, Yi Wendao would still have some confidence in Yi Xing. However, if it had only been 5 days, this confidence was close to zero. Hearing Yi Wendao's question, the few elders at the side glanced at Yi Xing, but didn't have any other reaction. They had all deeply experienced the difficulty of cultivating an incomplete upper-grade martial art. They didn't think that Yi Xing would be able to cultivate an upper-grade martial art in 5 days, not even one type. On the other hand, Yi Yunlong and the other junior disciples all pricked up their ears. They were still in the young age of their lives and learned everything very quickly. Furthermore, Yi Xing had displayed a heaven-defying talent in martial arts cultivation. Therefore, they had more confidence in Yi Xing than the elders of their clan. Of course, they also understood the difficulty of cultivating an incomplete upper-grade martial art, so they still had a certain level of rationality. Although their confidence in Yi Xing was greater than the elders of their clan, it still didn't exceed 30%. Yi Xing's expression was calm as he said unhurriedly, "I thank the clan for nurturing me and giving me the opportunity to learn an upper-grade martial art. I have already cultivated the Thousand Shadows Fist." Yi Wendao's calm gaze suddenly exploded with waves, shooting out a bright light in an instant. The few elders at the side were even more shocked as their expressions changed greatly. They looked at Yi Xing as if they were looking at a monster. Yi Yunlong and the other junior disciples were also shocked, but more than that, they were pleasantly surprised. He had successfully cultivated an upper-grade martial art. What did this mean? Even the disciples who had previously disapproved of Yi Xing were deeply impressed by Yi Xing at this moment. Those who were ranked at the bottom were even more delighted. Yi Xing had already displayed terrifying strength when he defeated Elder Yi Weining. Now that he had cultivated an upper-grade martial art, it was like adding wings to a tiger. His strength had increased by quite a bit. He would definitely be able to amaze everyone in the recruitment competition and greatly increase his chances of winning against Gui Jin and Xiong Qifeng. You have really cultivated it. Yi Wendao looked at Yi Xing in surprise and asked excitedly. He was afraid that he had misheard. Yi Xing's Thousand Shadows Fist was about to reach the realm of large success. Therefore, as long as he didn't reveal his attainments in the Thousand Shadows Fist, it would be fine. Since he had already learned the 1,000 shadows fished, there was nothing to hide. Moreover, he believed that with his strength, even if he were to face Gui Jin and Xiong Qifeng, the possibility of him needing to use an upper-grade martial art was very small. This wouldn't have much of an impact on his results in the recruitment competition. Yi Xing nodded affirmatively. Good. After receiving Yi Xing's affirmation, Yuan Dao clapped his hands and laughed happily. Ha! Very good. Yi Xing, you have shocked me once again. Our Yi clan has finally produced a talent. In this recruitment competition, you will definitely amaze the world and bring glory to our Yi clan. You have a chance to enter the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class, a very good chance. The Yi clan's elder being taught a lesson by a junior disciple wasn't something to be proud of. Therefore, Yuan Dao had long ago ordered that no one in the Yi clan would spread the news of the battle between Yi Xing and Yi Weining. As the person who had been slapped in the face, Yi Weining naturally couldn't spread the news of his embarrassing incident. Therefore, the martial artists of Celestial Azure City still thought that Yi Xing's strength was the same as when he had participated in the Genius Summit. In fact, many martial artists of Celestial Azure City didn't even know that Yi Xing had returned alive from the Azure Cloud Mountain range. Therefore, Yuan Dao was right that Yi Xing would amaze the world in the recruitment competition of the Purple Mountain Academy. The recruitment competition will be held in the Central Plaza in front of the City Lord Mansion. Let's go. After confirming that Yi Xing had really mastered an upper-grade martial art, Yuan Dao was in high spirits. His entire aura had risen by a notch, and his mood was incomparably carefree. New book begging to be collected and recommended. New book begging to be collected and recommended. New book begging to be collected and recommended. Chapter 69. Azure Sky City Central Square was packed with people. Today was the day of the Indigo Mountain Academy's recruitment. The Indigo Mountain Academy was open to all the younger generation geniuses in Azure Sky City. It was the busiest day in the past 3 years. Although the various forces had already screened the younger generation geniuses before the recruitment competition, limiting the number of participants, it didn't stop the enthusiasm of Azure Sky City's cultivators. Because it was too difficult to enter the Indigo Mountain Academy. Every 3 years, within the entire Azure Sky City, only 10 of the younger generation geniuses would be lucky enough to become a student of the Indigo Mountain Academy. Entering the Indigo Mountain Academy was akin to a carp leaping over the Dragon Gate. Their future achievements would be at least a 6th-level martial artist. When they returned to Azure Sky City, even in the Yi, Wei, and Xiong families, they would be treated as family elders. As for the other families, if any of their descendants were lucky enough to enter the Indigo Mountain Academy, they would definitely be able to inherit the patriarch's position. At least 90% of the upper echelons of the various families in Azure Sky City had entered the Indigo Mountain Academy to study. Thus, becoming a student of the Indigo Mountain Academy was a symbol of potential and status. Such an important event naturally attracted the attention of all the forces in Azure Sky City. It was impossible not to be lively. In the center of the square, a stage was built. It was about 10 zhang wide, and beside it was a tall tablet with the words Indigo Mountain Academy's recruitment competition written on it. At the edge of the square, there was a stone tablet about 20 zhang tall. Yi Xing and the rest followed Yuan Dao and several other family elders to the central square, passing by this stone tablet. Yi Xing raised his head and saw several names engraved on the stone tablet. He asked, "What tablet is this?" Yi Yunlong, who was standing at the side, had a look of longing in his eyes as he said, "This is the Leaving Names Monument. Only those who have entered the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class can leave their names on the monument." The Leaving Names Monument was created 100 years ago when our Yi clan's Duke Tianju participated in the recruitment competition. Because he was too talented, the City Lord Manor set up this monument for him to leave his name on. Later on, as long as you enter the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class, you can leave your name on this monument. Being able to leave your name on it is the greatest honor for a cultivator of celestial azure city. Yixing said in surprise, why did they leave their names so high up, and leave the bottom blank? On the name's monument, the lowest name was at least 10 feet off the ground, and the highest name was at least 16 to 17 feet off the ground. Yi Yunlong faintly smiled and said, to be able to enter the genius class, which one of them isn't proud and arrogant? Since they have left their names, how could they be willing to be below others? In any case, the monument is so tall, so when they leave their names, they will naturally do their best to leave it at a higher spot. This can also be considered a secret competition between the students of different classes. Whoever leaves their name higher will have more face. Yixing quietly understood and looked at the names with the highest names. There were 2 names that were at least 10 feet higher than the ones below. One was Yi Tianjue, and the other was Xiong Qixing. Yi Tianjue and Xiong Qixing's names were very close to each other, and Xiong Qixing's name was slightly higher. Yi Tianjue was the number 1 genius in the history of the Yi clan, a martial master, and a legend of the Yi clan. Yixing naturally knew him. As for this Xiong Qixing, Yixing didn't know, but he guessed Xiong Qixing's identity. Yixing asked, this Xiong Qixing, is he one of the students from the genius class that the Purple Mountain Academy recruited last time? He had never heard of the Xiong clan having an 8th level martial master, but the Xiong clan had a genius that was currently studying in the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class. It wasn't hard to guess this Xiong Qixing's identity. Yi Tianlong nodded, his voice melancholy. Xiong Qixing's aptitude is very high, an 8-star martial fate realm. In terms of cultivation speed, compared to Duke Tianjue's youth, he was a level higher. After Duke Tianjue passed away, although the Yi clan's strength gradually declined, the Xiong clan gradually became stronger. They claimed to be the number 1 martial arts family, but they weren't recognized by the martial artists of Azure Sky City. Until the appearance of the 8-star martial fate realm, especially when Xiong Qixing became a student of the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class, the martial artists of Azure Sky City recognized the Xiong clan as the number 1 martial arts family. Sigh. If Xiong Qixing really becomes a martial master, the Xiong clan will definitely be as glorious as the Yi clan was during Duke Tianjue's era, becoming the overlord of Azure Sky City for decades. Yixing smiled faintly, hee hee. Xiong Qixing hasn't become a martial master yet, who knows what will happen in the future. Yixing was a man whose goal was to become a martial saint. Naturally, he wasn't very interested in Xiong Qixing, an 8-star martial fate realm. Moreover, Azure Sky City still had Wei Qingxian, a monstrous genius. In Yixing's opinion, it wasn't very possible for the Xiong clan to dominate Azure Sky City in the future. Yixing's gaze once again fell on the name at the top of the recognition monument. He thought to himself, Xiong Qixing, looks like the highest time you've left your name on the recognition monument is these 3 years. If Yixing was only slightly disgusted with the Xiong clan before, then ever since Xiong Baotian entered the Azure Sky Mountains to hunt him down, he didn't only feel disgusted with the Xiong clan, but also hated them. As long as there was a chance to step on the Xiong clan, Yixing definitely wouldn't let it go. For example, he would suppress Xiong Qixing's name on the recognition monument. However, there was a prerequisite to leaving one's name on the recognition monument, and that was to become a student of the Zishan Academy's genius class. Yixing was determined to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat in the recruitment competition. He would sweep through his peers with a crushing momentum. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to enter the genius class. The area around the arena was the area where the younger martial artists who were participating in the recruitment competition were. As for the martial artists who were watching the show, they were further away. Yixing brought Yixing and the rest to the vicinity of the arena. He left an elder to watch over Yixing and the rest while he brought the other elders to the pavilion at the side of the plaza. There was a place for him there. He had to accompany the Azure Sky City's city lord, Gutsangnan, to receive the important figures from the Zishan Marquis residence together with him. Zishan Marquis was the dean of the Zishan Academy. The teachers of the academy were only responsible for teaching the students. As for the recruitment of students, it was the Zishan Marquis residence's responsibility. As soon as Yuan Dao and the elders left, a mocking laugh came from the side. Yi Yunlong, I heard that you were defeated by a rising star of the Wei clan at the Genius Summit. TSK. Looks like you're really crippled. Not only can you not catch up to me and Gui Jin, you can't even compete with a rising star, aha. It was a junior of the Xiong clan. The person who could say this was naturally Xiong Qifeng, who was one of the 4 heavenly prides a year ago. The Ya clan now only had a 6th heaven realm elder to watch over the younger disciples. It was obvious that he couldn't suppress Xiong Qifeng, who was also a 6th heaven martial artist. If it was in the past, Yi Yunlong would definitely be furious to be mocked by Xiong Qifeng. However, ever since he was beaten by Yi Xing, Yi Yunlong had already untied the knot in his heart and was much more at ease. Facing Xiong Qifeng's mockery, he only smiled indifferently. Yi Yunlong said, Xiong Qifeng, you can't escape the fate of being surpassed by a rising star. What's there to be so excited about? Ha! Xiong Qifeng laughed disdainfully and said, Yi Yunlong, do you think I'm as useless as you? I'll be surpassed by a rising star. Ha! My cultivation has reached a level that you can't imagine. Open your eyes wide and watch me sweep away my peers in the recruitment competition, ha! Sweep away your peers. The corners of Yi Yunlong's mouth curled up, revealing a thought-provoking smile. He said, ah. At that time, I'm afraid it won't be you sweeping away your peers, but senior brother Yi Xing beating you to the ground. Yi Yunlong imagined the scene of Yi Weiniang's teeth being broken by Yi Xing and blood spitting out of his mouth to Xiong Qifeng. His heart was filled with joy, and his smile grew wider. Senior brother Yi Xing. Xiong Qifeng heard the way Yi Yunlong addressed Yi Xing. After a moment of surprise, he laughed disdainfully. Yi Yunlong, oh Yi Yunlong, so not only have you been surpassed by Wei Qingxian, but now you've been surpassed by this brat Yi Xing ha. It seems that I've overestimated you. So you're not only useless, you're useless to the point that you can't be any more useless. Yi Yunlong smiled freely and no longer paid attention to Xiong Qifeng, who was biting like a mad dog. Yi Xing, on the other hand, didn't care about Xiong Qifeng at all. His gaze turned to the other side, where the Wei clan juniors were. Wei Qingxian was naturally among the younger generation of the Wei clan. Her face was once again covered by a thin veil. Other than Yi Xing, who had seen her true appearance, there were probably very few other men who had seen her true appearance. When Yi Xing looked over, she also looked over at the Ya family juniors, searching for Yi Xing's figure. Their gazes met in an instant. Although they hadn't known each other for a long time and hadn't spent much time together, they had only gone through hardships together in the underground cave for a few days before being sent back to Celestial City by the red-clothed lady on a giant eagle. However, there was a certain degree of friendship between the two. Even so, because of their past experiences together, there was an extraordinary feeling between the two. Seeing each other, the two smiled in unison. Even though Wei Qingxuan's face was covered with a veil, Yi Xing could sense the smile on her face from her eyes. Wei Qingxian, who was standing beside Wei Qingxian, sensed something. After glancing at Wei Qingxian, she followed Wei Qingxuan's gaze and looked over. At this moment, Yuan Dao had already brought a few elders to the loft at the side of the square. Wei Jingguang and Xiong Baolong had already arrived. A certain family is going to be at the bottom of the Zishan Academy's recruitment this time. Yuan Dao had just finished greeting Wei Jingguang when Xiong Baolong mocked him from the side. The number 1 junior disciple can't even compare to the rising star of the Wei family. Ha! In the previous recruitment, a certain family was able to get 2 people into the Zishan Academy. I wonder if there will be one this time. Tisk tsk tsk tsk. This used to be the #1 martial arts family in Celestial City. They used to be the overlord, but now they have fallen to such a state. Ha! If this continues, it won't be long before they lose the qualifications to be on par with our Xiong family. An elder from the Xiong family followed Xiong Baolong's words and attacked the Ya family. Yuan Dao wasn't angry when he heard this. He was much more shrewd than Yi Yunlong. Even though he was happy in his heart, he didn't show it on his face. I'll let you be arrogant now. When the recruitment competition is over, haha, you'll realize that your words now are just slapping your own mouth. Chapter 70. The patriarchs and elders of the Yi, Wei, and Xiong aristocratic families were all gathered together. There were also many patriarchs of the first-rate families in Celestial Ocean City present. Naturally, the loft was filled with discussions. It was only when the Celestial Ocean City Lord, Gu Tsangnan, came up with a middle-aged scholar that the loft quieted down. Gu Tsangnan was the only 8th-level martial Dao master in Celestial Ocean City. Even the patriarchs of the Yi, Wei, and Xiong aristocratic families had to be respectful when they saw Gu Tsangnan. However, Gu Tsangnan was now respectfully following beside the middle-aged scholar. It could be seen that the middle-aged scholar's status was much higher than Gu Tsangnan's. To be able to make Gu Tsangnan act in such a manner, the middle-aged scholar's identity was obvious. When the two of them stepped into the loft, whether it was a 6th-level martial artist or a 7th-level martial artist, all of them stood up. Gu Tsangnan introduced, "Everyone, this is Mr. Mu Feng from the Zishan Marquis residence. He is a peak 8th-level martial Dao master." The martial artists in the loft were all leaders of the major forces in Celestial Ocean City. However, there were very few people who knew this Mr. Mu Feng from the Zishan Marquis residence. However, when they heard Gu Tsangnan introduce him as a peak 8th-level martial Dao master, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. The people present were either in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. Other than Gu Tsangnan, there was no other martial Dao master. Moreover, even Gu Tsangnan's cultivation was only at the mid-8th level. However, Mu Feng looked to be in his 30s and was actually a peak 8th level martial Dao master. This was indeed shocking. Excluding the county capital, Zishan County had a total of 67 cities. Celestial Ocean City was only one of these 67 cities. The person in charge of recruitment in Celestial Ocean City was a martial Dao master. It could be seen that the cultivation of the people in charge of the other cities was not much different. They should also be martial Dao masters. 67 cities meant 67 martial Dao masters. It was rumored that under Zishan Marquis residence, experts were as common as clouds. It seemed that this was true. The cultivators present were all leaders of Celestial Azure City, but in front of Mu Feng, whether it was in terms of cultivation or status, they were not worth mentioning. After Gu Tsangnan introduced them, they naturally came forward to greet him. Mu Feng's expression wasn't arrogant, but he wasn't enthusiastic either. He faintly nodded to the crowd and then said to Gu Tsangnan, "Lord Gu, let the competition begin." Gu Tsangnan invited Mu Feng to sit on the main seat, and then sat beside him. He said, "The Zishan Academy's recruitment competition will be hosted by the City Lord's Mansion's martial Dao master, Gu Jing. Patriarch Xiong, Patriarch Ya, and Patriarch Wei, each of your 3 families will have 3 protected spots. Please inform Gu Jing." The so-called protected spots were reserved for the strongest and most promising junior elites who had the highest chance of getting into the top 10. In order to prevent them from meeting each other too early and being eliminated in advance, the protected spots would not be arranged for the younger elites to fight each other in the first 2 rounds of the competition to prevent the strong from being eliminated. For example, Yi Yunlong and Wei Qinyan. With their strength, they would definitely enter the top 10. However, if they met each other in the first round of the competition, one of them would definitely be eliminated. Therefore, they had to be included in the protected spots to prevent them from meeting each other too early. Gu Zhangnan first said Patriarch Xiong, then Patriarch Yi, then Patriarch Wei. This was not a random address, but an order according to the strength ranking of the three great martial arts families. The answers of the three naturally had to follow the order of Gu Zhangnan's words, and could not be disorderly. Violent Bear took the lead and said, Xiong Qifeng, Xiong Qikai, Xiong Qiyu. These three were the top three of the Xiong family's younger elites. The protected spots were naturally reserved for the strongest junior. After Violent Bear finished speaking, Yi Wendao said, Yi Xing, Yi Yunlong, Yi Yundai. When these words came out, not only did Violent Bear's expression change, but most of the cultivators present were also shocked. Yi Xing, Yi Yunlong, Yi Yundai. Yi Wendao said three names, but Yi Yunlong wasn't first. When the three protected spots were mentioned, it was usually from the first to the third. Didn't this mean that Yi Xing's strength had already surpassed Yi Yunlong's and he had become the Ya family's #1 junior? Some of the patriarchs might not know who Yi Xing was, but the three great martial arts families, the city lord's mansion, as well as the families that had close relations with the Yi, Wei, and Xiong families, were very clear. During this year's Genius Summit, Yi Xing's name had already spread throughout Celestial Azure City. It was only because there was an even more outstanding Wei Qingxian that he was ignored. However, there were still many people who noticed Yi Xing. They never imagined that in such a short time, Yi Xing would actually surpass Yi Yunlong and become the Ya family's #1 junior. Violent Bear was very surprised that Yi Xing's strength had surpassed Yi Yunlong's, but he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he sneered, a mere disciple of a clan can become #1. It seems that the Ya family's juniors really have no successors. Yi Wendao ignored Violent Bear's sneer, his expression as usual. At this time, Wei Jingguang had already mentioned the Wei family's three protected spots, Wei Qingxian, Wei Qingyan, Wei Qingzhou. Wei Qingxian had already surpassed Yi Yunlong during the Genius Summit and her name had spread throughout Celestial Azure City. She was one of the most influential figures among the younger generation of Celestial Azure City. No one was surprised that she was ranked above Wei Qingyan. Gu Zhangnan said to a middle-aged man in his 40s, add Jian to the list of protected spots. The 10 protected spots cannot meet in the first 2 rounds. Gu Jing, you go. Gu Jing quickly arrived at the arena in the middle of the square and announced the 10 protected spots and the list of opponents. The recruitment competition had begun. There were a total of 62 participants in this recruitment competition. Among them, there were 10 from the Yi, Wei, and Xiong families, 5 from the city lord residence, and a total of 27 juniors from the other families in Celestial Azure City. The competition was divided into 6 rounds. In the first round, Gu Yijin and Xiong Qifeng, the 2 geniuses, directly advanced to the next round. The remaining 60 people would face off against each other. The 30 victors, including Gu Yijin and Xiong Qifeng, made 32 people who would continue to the next round. After that, 32 would advance to 16, 16 would advance to 8, 8 would advance to 4, 4 would advance to 2, and 2 would advance to 1. Yi Xing's first opponent was called Zhang Bixing. He was 18 years old and had a cultivation of mid-5th level. He wasn't a descendant of the Yi, Wei, or Xiong martial arts families. It was indeed very outstanding for him to reach mid-5th level at the age of 18. In the Zhang family, Zhang Bixing was the only disciple with a cultivation of 5th level, far surpassing his peers. However, when placed among the elites of the younger generation in Celestial Azure City, Zhang Bixing wasn't considered outstanding. Naturally, he couldn't be compared to Yi Xing. Although his name was Zhang Bixing, he was utterly defeated in front of Yi Xing. Facing Zhang Bixing, Yi Xing didn't take the initiative to attack. Instead, he stood on the spot without moving a single step. Relying on his strong body that had reached perfection in bronze art, he sent Zhang Bixing flying 3 times in a row. Zhang Bixing was thrown further and harder each time. After being sent flying 3 times, he finally understood that the difference in strength between him and Yixing was too great. He admitted defeat. Before this, some of the younger martial artists who didn't know Yixing were surprised that Yixing was able to enter the top 10 protected spots. Now, they understood that Yixing's strength was really extraordinary. Seeing how he sent Zhang Bixing flying with just a raise of his hand, it was obvious that he didn't use any of his true strength. As for the younger martial artists who knew Yixing, they didn't have much of a reaction to Yixing easily defeating Zhang Bixing. This was a matter of course. In the first round of the competition, it wasn't just Yixing Wei Qingxian, Yi Yunlong, Wei Qingyan, and the rest of the younger elites who were listed in the protected spots easily defeated their opponents. Moreover, through this round of competition, the difference between the ordinary families and the 3 martial arts families could be clearly seen. At least 80% of the ordinary families' juniors were eliminated in the first round of the competition. As for the 3 martial arts families' juniors, nearly 80% of them advanced to the next round. The first 2 rounds of the competition could only be considered as the prologue. The real intense battles were after the 3rd round. In the 2nd round, Gu Yijian and Xiong Qifeng joined the competition. Together with the 30 people who had won in the first round, they formed 16 pairs. Based on the principle of protecting the famous guests from meeting in the first 2 rounds, Yixing didn't meet a strong opponent in the 2nd round. It was Yi Yunjian, who was ranked 7th among the younger elites of the main family. Yi Yunjian knew this, so he didn't fight Yixing and directly admitted defeat. Yixing advanced to the 3rd round. Like Yixing, the other juniors who were on the list of protected juniors also won easily in the 2nd round. Gu Yijian and Xiong Qifeng's opponents also directly admitted defeat. Not long after, the 3rd round of the competition began. In the 3rd round, 8 out of 16 would advance to the next round. 8 of the top 10 would be decided at once. This round of the competition was finally getting a little intense. The spectators, in particular, were all very excited. Gu Jing announced the name list for the 3rd round of the competition. In this round, there were a total of 8 matches. Out of the 10 protected spots, 4 of them would face off. They were Yi Yunlong against Xiong Qiyu, and Gu Yijin against Wei Qingzhou. Although they were among the 10 protected spots, Yi Yunlong and Gu Yijin were both 6th-level martial artists, while Xiong Qiyu and Wei Qingzhou were both at the peak of 5th level. The difference in strength was too great, so they were defeated one after another. The disciples who were among the top 10 protected spots were the elites of the elites. Naturally, they were very strong. The opponents of the other 6 weren't among the protected juniors, so they won all their matches. Yixing's opponent in the 3rd round was also a junior from an ordinary family. His name was Xiao Chang, but he was much stronger than Zhang Bixing, who he had met in the first round. He was at the peak of 5th level. If he were to meet the other protected 5th level juniors, they would definitely go through an intense battle to determine the victor. Unfortunately, his opponent was Yixing. Yixing had made up his mind to sweep his peers in the recruitment competition. He wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat and attract the attention of the person in charge of recruitment. Naturally, he didn't tangle with Xiao Chang. In a few moves, he sent Xiao Chang flying more than 10 meters. Yixing won easily and advanced to the top 8. The top 10 would be recruited by Mount Indigo Academy, so entering the ordinary class was a given. However, Yixing's goal wasn't to enter the ordinary class, but to enter the gifted class. The top 8 wasn't his goal. He only had one goal, and that was to be number 1. Chapter 71. The 3rd round of the competition ended, and the list of the top 8 was announced. Gu Yijian, Xiong Qifeng, Wei Qingyan, Yi Yunlong, Wei Qingxian, Xiong Qikai, Yi Yundai, and Yixing. Some were happy, while others were sad. The happiest were none other than the Yi clan's martial artists. In this recruitment competition, the Yi clan had achieved excellent results. Among the top 8, the Yi clan occupied 3 seats. The Xiong clan and Wei clan each occupied 2 seats, while the city lord's residence occupied 1 seat. Hee hee. In the loft, Yi Wendao was very happy. After hearing the list of the top 8, he laughed heartily. Brother Wendao, this time your Ya family can be considered proud and glorious. 3 of the top 8 are actually descendants of the Ya family. TSK, this time, the Ya family really made a comeback. Wei Jingguang congratulated Yi Wendao. Although there were only 2 people from the Wei clan in the top 8, Wei Jingguang was in a good mood. As the head of the Wei clan, Wei Jingguang naturally knew how talented Wei Qingxian was. Not only was her aptitude extremely high, but her martial arts talent was also extremely heaven-defying. She was both a cultivation genius and a martial arts prodigy. She had enormous potential. Wei Qingxian was so outstanding. In Wei Jingguang's opinion, she would definitely be recruited into the gifted class by the Zishan Academy. A student in the gifted class was more valuable than 10 students in the ordinary classes. As long as Wei Qingxian could enter the gifted class, no matter how many people from the Ya family entered the ordinary class, they would not be able to overshadow the Wei clan's limelight in this recruitment competition. Wei Jingguang was not at all worried that the Ya family's descendants would be too outstanding and embarrass the Wei clan in this recruitment competition. Therefore, he was in a very good mood. Compared to Wei Jingguang's good mood, Xiong Baolong was extremely depressed. Before the recruitment competition started, he had already mocked Yi Wendao in front of his face. He wondered if the Yi clan would be able to recruit someone in this recruitment competition. However, the competition had only entered the 3rd round, and 3 members of the Ya family had already made it into the top 8. There was no doubt that they would be recruited by Zishan Academy. Thinking back to what he said before, Tyrannical Bear felt like he was slapping himself in the face. How could his mood be good? Fortunately, Xiong Baolong was very confident in Xiong Qifeng. As long as Xiong Qifeng could defeat his peers and take first place, there was an 80 to 90% chance that he would be recruited into the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class. As long as Qi Feng can enter the gifted class, humph. The winner of the recruitment competition this time is still my Xiong clan. For 2 consecutive batches of recruitment, there are juniors entering the gifted class. This is something that has never happened before in Celestial Azure City. Tyrannosaurus Xiong had such a thought. Finally, the gloominess in his heart was washed away, and he revealed a smile. The 4th round was quickly arranged by Gu Jing. Gu Yijin opened fire at Xiong Qi. Xiong Qifeng vs Yi Yundai. Yi Yunlong faced Wei Qingxian. Wei Qingyan faced Yi Xing. Among the top 8, there were 4 6th-tier martial artists. They were Gu Yijin, Xiong Qifeng, Yi Yunlong, and Wei Qingyan. In the 4th round, these 4 6th-tier 5th-tier martial artists were separated into 4 matches. In this way, Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian, the 2 rising stars, also avoided facing each other in the 4th round. The first 2 rounds of the competition ended very quickly. Gu Yijin and Xiong Qifeng were both Celestial Azure City's prodigies. They were experienced 6th-tier martial artists and were very powerful. As for Xiong Qikai and Yi Yundai, their cultivation had not broken through to 6th tier. To ordinary martial artists, martial arts attainments, body tempering techniques, speed, and so on only had disadvantages in front of 6th-tier martial artists. There were no advantages. In addition to the disparity in inner strength, the difference of a single tier in cultivation was like a chasm that was difficult to cross. Therefore, Xiong Qikai and Yi Yundai did not even last 3 moves against Gu Yijian and Xiong Qifeng before they were defeated. Xiong Qikai and Yi Yundai stopped at the top 8. Gu Yijian and Xiong Qifeng advanced to the 5th round. The third match of the fourth round was between Yi Yunlong and Wei Qingxian. This was a very interesting match. Whether it was the family heads in the pavilion or the spectators outside the square, their spirits were raised by a lot as they paid attention to the battle in the arena. At the Genius Summit, Wei Qingxuan's name shook Celestial Azure City. She had already defeated Yi Yunlong. Moreover, at the Genius Summit, only the top 10 elite disciples of the three major families watched that battle. The rest had only heard about it. Today, everyone was lucky enough to witness the battle between Yi Yunlong and Wei Qingxian. Naturally, they were excited. Moreover, Yi Yunlong's cultivation had broken through and stepped into the sixth tier of the martial path. His inner strength had been refined into his skin and his strength had increased greatly. As for Wei Qingxian, although her cultivation had also increased greatly, it was still within the fifth tier of the martial path. Her inner strength had not undergone any fundamental changes. Between the two of them, who was stronger and who was weaker, everyone wanted to know. The difference in strength between a fifth-tier martial artist and a sixth-tier martial artist was very large. Most people thought that Yi Yunlong would be able to redeem himself. However, there were also a few people who had the opposite view. They thought that Yi Yunlong had no chance of winning at all. For example, Yi Xing knew Wei Qingxuan's strength very well. Even if he fought her, if he did not use a bow and arrow and did not use his superbrain to scan for flaws, he did not have much confidence in defeating her. Apart from Yi Xing, there were also some members of the Wei family who understood Wei Qingxuan's strength. They were also very confident in Wei Qingxian. The result was just as Yi Xing and the others had expected. It was beyond the expectations of most people. As soon as the peak stage of the mountain technique was used, the huge pressure that was like a mountain pressing down on Yi Yunlong made him feel uncomfortable and his strength was reduced. Coupled with Wei Qingxuan's peak stage martial arts technique, even if Yi Yunlong's inner force was a notch higher and cultivated to the point of skin membrane, he was still easily defeated by Wei Qingxian. In less than 10 moves, Yi Yunlong was defeated in just 7 moves. This shocked most of the audience. Senior brother Yi Xing, this woman is too strong. I feel that her strength is not inferior to Gu Yijin and Xiong Qifeng. If you encounter her, you must be more careful. After Yi Yunlong was defeated and left the arena, he whispered in Yi Xing's ear. Without facing Wei Qingxian directly, it was difficult to understand the oppressive power of the mountain technique. However, Yi Yunlong deeply experienced it. He already knew how terrifying Wei Qingxian was. She was definitely much stronger than others imagined. Yi Xing smiled slightly, nodded at Yi Yunlong, and then went up the arena. Wei Qingyan also came up at the same time and said, "My sister said that my strength is not as good as yours and that it's useless to fight. However, I still want to experience your skills." Wei Qingyan's words, or perhaps it should be Wei Qingxuan's words, caused many of the audience to disagree. Yi Xing's reputation in Tiansang City was after all worse than Wei Qingxuan's. Other than the Ya family, very few people felt that Yi Xing could be compared to Wei Qingxian. As for Yi Xing's level 5 cultivation, it was very hard to believe that he could defeat Wei Qingyan, who was at level 6 cultivation. Yi Xing nodded lightly and said, "Then you must be careful. I won't deliberately go easy on you just because you're a woman." Wei Qingyan was last year's proud daughter, so she still had a trace of pride in her heart. She said, "Go all out. I don't need you to show mercy. All right, I'm going to make my move." After Wei Qingyan finished speaking, she suddenly took a step forward. Her body was light, swaying lightly in the air. Wei Qingyan's speed seemed very slow, but in reality, she was not only fast, but also very agile. In the blink of an eye, she circled behind Yi Xing. The corner of Yi Xing's mouth curled up. Wei Qingyan's forte was her movement technique, and she could defeat her opponent in agile combat. However, no matter how strong her movement technique was, it was nothing in front of him. Because his 7-star steps integrated with the wind force, he was already at the stage of perfection. Yixing stepped on the 7-star steps, and the moment he used the stage of perfection 7-star steps, his body changed direction and position in a flash. Almost at the same moment that Wei Qingyan appeared behind Yixing, Yixing suddenly appeared in front of Wei Qingyan. Mountain-splitting palm. Yixing struck out with his palm. Wei Qingyan originally wanted to circle behind Yixing and launch a sneak attack, but now she couldn't even dodge in time and could only strike out with her palm. Bang! There was a crisp sound, and Wei Qingyan cried out in surprise. She felt an extremely terrifying force coming toward her. Even though she was a level 6 martial artist and her inner force had been refined to the point of skin membrane, it did not cause any harm to Yixing. Instead, she felt some pain in her palm, and her body was pushed back by the terrifying force. Wei Qingyan only managed to stabilize her body after retreating for a full 10 steps. Her eyes were filled with shock. She clearly did not expect that she would be defeated by Yixing in one strike. The elders in the loft all looked shocked. Even Mu Feng from the Zishan Marquis residence showed some interest in his lazy eyes. The audience outside the square sucked in a breath of cold air one by one. Most people thought that Yixing would reach the top 8, but they did not expect Yixing to win so cleanly against Wei Qingxian. His strength was far beyond their imagination. In the eyes of the Ya family, Yixing's performance in the recruitment competition was expected. In the eyes of other martial artists, Yixing was a big dark horse in this recruitment competition. I lost. Wei Qingyan sighed and leaped down from the arena. You let me win. Yixing looked indifferent. He nodded at Wei Qingyan and also left the arena, returning to the younger generation of the Yi clan. The 4th round of the competition ended. Out of the 4 level 6 martial artists, 2 advanced and 2 were eliminated. Wei Qingxian and Yixing both defeated level 6 martial artists and advanced to the top 4, competing with the 2 favored sons of heaven, Gui Jin and Xiong Qifeng. Chapter 72. Ji Yujing walked up to the arena and announced the matchups for the 5th round. Gui Jin vs Wei Qingxian. Xiong Qifeng vs Yixing. Gui Jin and Xiong Qifeng were the 2 great geniuses of the younger generation in Celestial Ocean City. They were the 2 most popular candidates to win first place in this year's recruitment competition. Therefore, in the arrangement of the competition, the 2 of them were key protected spots. As long as there were other opponents, they would not be arranged to fight each other. In this way, although they avoided Gui Jin and Xiong Qifeng's duel, they also avoided the possibility of Yixing and Wei Qingxian fighting each other in advance. In Yixing's heart, Wei Qingxian was the strongest opponent, and also the only opponent among the younger generation in Celestial Ocean City. The later he fought Wei Qingxian, the more Yixing liked it. Wei Qingxian felt the same way. Of course, Gui Jin and Xiong Qifeng only saw each other as the biggest obstacle in the fight for first place. They did not see Yixing and Wei Qingxian as real opponents. In this way, the 4 of them were very satisfied with the arrangement for the 5th round. The first to go up was Gui Jin and Wei Qingxian. Gui Jin was only 17 years old. He was dressed in brown clothes, his face was sharp and resolute, and he held an ancient bronze sword in his arms. Standing in the arena, there was a sharp aura, like a sharp sword, showing off its sharpness. Among the younger generation in Celestial Ocean City, there were many experts who used the sword. For example, Yi Yunlong was an expert swordsman. However, the most famous swordsman of the younger generation was none other than Gui Jin. Compared to Gui Jin's sharp aura, Wei Qingxian had a majestic aura like that of a mountain. Wei Qingxuan's face was covered with a thin veil, so outsiders could not see her peerless appearance. However, from her slim and graceful figure, they could tell that she was a beauty. Such a slender, elegant, and beautiful young lady, yet she possessed a heavy, mountain-like aura. It was truly contradictory. However, on Wei Qingxian, these two feelings were perfectly combined. This was the effect of cultivating the mountain technique to perfection. Its might was in harmony with the heaven and earth, making it look very natural. Gu Yijin held the ancient bronze sword in his arms as his gaze roamed over Wei Qingxuan's exquisite body. The corners of his lips curled up in a lonely smile. He obviously did not regard Wei Qingxian as a formidable enemy. He smiled and said, 5 swords. I only need 5 strikes to defeat you. After he finished speaking, Gu Yijin added, furthermore, before I defeat you with 5 strikes, I will first slice open your veil. I heard that you have looks that are not inferior to your sisters. Let me see if this rumor is true. Ha! You don't have to be afraid. My swordsmanship is extraordinarily precise. It won't be off in the slightest and won't harm a single hair on your body. Wei Qingxuan's expression was calm. Her gaze was slightly exquisite as she said, I hope your swordsmanship isn't as full of nonsense as your words. Gu Yijin was startled. Then, he chuckled and said, interesting. I like cold girls like you. Wei Qingxuan's expression turned cold and she said, you talk too much nonsense. Make your move. A trace of anger appeared on Gu Yijin's face. Wei Qingxuan's attitude towards him had ultimately angered him. He snorted coldly and said, watch out for my sword. In an instant, the treasured sword was unsheathed and a flash of cold light shot out. In less than the blink of an eye, Gu Yijin had already appeared in front of Wei Qingxian. The tip of his sword had already pierced Wei Qingxuan's throat. Hiss! All the martial artists below the level of martial Dao masters sucked in a breath of cold air. Gu Yijin's sword was too fast. Even the vast majority of level 6 martial artists revealed looks of fear. Gu Yijin's swordsmanship made them feel fearful. However, as the target of the attack, Wei Qingxian did not show the slightest bit of fear. Her gaze was calm and instead revealed a trace of relief. At this moment, Wei Qingxuan's body suddenly retreated backward. Middle-grade body movement technique, butterfly dance steps. It was the same body movement technique as Wei Qingyan. Her body looked light, but her speed was very fast. Moreover, Wei Qingxuan's attainments in the butterfly dance steps were much higher than her sister Wei Qingyan's. Not only was it at the realm of perfection, but it had also integrated the power of wind into it. She stood at the realm of perfection and could be said to be mysterious. The speed of Gu Yijin's sword was extremely fast. However, the tip of the sword was 3 inches away from Wei Qingxuan's throat and it could not get any closer. It was not that Gu Yijin could not stab it down, but the speed of Wei Qingxuan's retreat was synchronized with the speed of Gu Yijin's sword. Although Gu Yijin's inner strength exploded wave after wave, constantly increasing the speed of the sword, wanting to lift Wei Qingxuan's veil, the last 3 inches of distance was like a natural moat that could not be crossed. Gu Yijin used up all his energy in one go but still could not catch up with Wei Qingxian. He could only stop his body, take a deep breath, and then swing his sword again. There was a flash of sword light and the treasured sword drew a fine ray of light in the void. Wei Qingxuan's body leaped up and the treasured sword swept an inch below her feet. At the same time as she dodged the treasured sword, the tip of her foot pressed down and lightly tapped on the body of the sword. This tap was near the tip of the treasured sword and was very far away from the hilt. There was a feeling of using 4 ounces to move 1,000 pounds, causing the treasured sword in Gu Yijin's hand to sink down and deviate from its direction. As for Wei Qingxian, she made use of the momentum to leap over Gu Yijin's head. Next, she landed lightly over 10 meters behind Gu Yijin. Is this your extraordinarily accurate sword technique? When Wei Qingxian landed, she chuckled. Gu Yijin's face immediately turned green and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He said coldly, previously, I was being protective of you and was afraid of hurting you. Humph. Now. I can't care about that anymore. As he spoke, Gu Yijian's body did not stop moving. His inner strength was activated to the extreme and the treasured sword brought about a cold light. In an instant, he turned around and charged toward Wei Qingxian. However, how could Gu Yijian's swordsmanship compare to the speed of the perfected butterfly dance steps that had been integrated into the wind force? Every time Gu Yijian attacked with his sword, it was extremely fast. However, after 10 consecutive attacks, Wei Qingxian dodged them all. They did not even touch the corners of her clothes. The surrounding audience was all shocked. Even some of the important figures in the pavilion had strange looks on their faces. At first, other than a few people, who would have thought that Wei Qingxuan's cultivation of the 5th level of the martial path could actually threaten the status of Gu Yijian and Xiong Qifeng, 2 favored sons of heaven. Even though Wei Qingxian had the potential, her cultivation had not broken through to the 6th level of the martial path. Gu Yijian, on the other hand, had already broken through to the 6th level of the martial path for half a year. He was only one step away from consolidating his cultivation of the 6th level. In the pavilion, Wei Jingguang's face was calm, but the look in his eyes revealed the joy in his heart. Beside him, Yi Wendao was shocked. He said, "Brother Jingguang, Wei Qingxuan's strength has actually reached such a level. This is really unexpected. This time, she has the strength to compete for first place. It seems that her entering the gifted class is basically a done deal." Wei Jingguang's face finally revealed a smile. He said, "Hee hee. Yi Xing is also not bad. Yi Xing is also not bad." Although he said that, anyone could tell that Wei Jingguang's tone was somewhat perfunctory. Obviously, he did not think that Yi Xing could be compared to Wei Qingxian. Yi Wendao knew that Yi Xing's strength was definitely not inferior to Wei Qingxuan's. However, he only smiled and did not say it out loud. On the other hand, Xiong Baolong on the side continued, saying, "How can Yi Xing be compared to Wei Qingxian? Congratulations, Brother Jingguang. The Wei family has produced a good junior. In the future, there will be another quota for Celestial Azure City's prodigies." Although the Xiong family was publicly recognized as the #1 martial arts family in Celestial Azure City, the Ye family's strength was not much worse than theirs. They had always been on good terms with the Wei family and had a strategy to attack the Ye family. Wei Jingguang smiled slightly and did not answer. The Xiong family was powerful. The Wei family had always been allied with the Ye family to contend against the Xiong family. Naturally, they had a better relationship with the Ye family. At this time, answering Xiong Baolong's words would be openly slapping the Ye family's face. Naturally, he could not do that. In the arena, Gu Yijian had already struck out 18 times. The middle-grade martial arts technique, Hurricane 18 Swords, was all about speed. With the momentum of a hurricane sweeping away a fallen leaf, it defeated the opponent. Unfortunately, Gu Yijian had already executed Hurricane 18 Swords once and still could not sweep away the fallen leaf that was Wei Qingxian. Gu Yijian sheathed his sword and stood there, panting. He said angrily, "Wei Qingxian, you only know how to dodge and dodge. What's the point of continuing to fight like this? How are we going to determine the winner?" Wei Qingxian smiled faintly and said, "I still have to fight for first place with someone later. Of course, I have to spend the least amount of energy to defeat you. Ha! Right now, I haven't even used up 10% of my inner force. Looking at how panting you are, that crazy attack just now must have used up at least half of your inner force. Don't you think this is meaningful?" As she spoke, Wei Qingxuan's eyes narrowed. It could be seen that she was smiling very brightly at this moment. After hearing Wei Qingxuan's words, the spectating martial artists came to their senses. It turned out that Wei Qingxian was not afraid to fight with Gu Yijian. She had avoided Gu Yijian's attacks on purpose. Her goal was to deplete Gu Yijian's inner force. From the looks of it, Wei Qingxian had already won more than half of the battle. The martial artists suddenly had a higher opinion of Wei Qingxian. Not only was this woman's cultivation aptitude astonishing, her martial arts talent was astonishing. Her intelligence was equally astonishing. After Gu Yijin understood the reason, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Before the final battle, he thought that he would be able to control the battle. Therefore, he made the bold statement of defeating Wei Qingxian in 5 strikes. In the end, not only did he fail to defeat Wei Qingxian in 5 strikes, he was instead played around by Wei Qingxian in the battle. At this moment, Gu Yijin should be calm and regulating his inner force. However, after understanding all this, he could not calm down. Instead, his anger grew stronger and stronger. Do you really think that's all there is to my strength? Gu Yijin shouted angrily. You can dodge the 18 Gale swords, but you can't dodge the Blazing Sun swordsmanship. The Blazing Sun swordsmanship was a high-grade martial arts technique. Gu Yijin's Blazing Sun swordsmanship was imparted to him by the Azure Sky City Lord, Gu Zhongnan. Although it was just a beginner's level, a high-grade martial arts technique was still a high-grade martial arts technique. It was extraordinary. As Gu Yijin's voice fell, the ancient bronze sword suddenly turned crimson red, as if it was being burned by a raging fire. The Blazing Sun swordsmanship converted inner force to the fire attribute. Its power was astonishing. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the ancient bronze sword turned into a sword screen and enveloped Wei Qingxian. The power of this sword was astonishing and extremely terrifying. At the same time, it also sealed off all of Wei Qingxuan's escape routes. The climax is coming, please recommend me. Chapter 73. The surrounding audience stared with their eyes wide open at this moment. High-grade martial arts techniques were extremely rare in Celestial City. Which martial artist did not want to witness the power of a high-grade martial arts technique? Moreover, the crowd was also worried for Wei Qingxian. The sword veil that Gu Yijin displayed was truly shocking and made one's heart palpitate. Wei Qingxian faced the sword veil with a calm expression. Gu Yijin was only a level 6 martial artist. His inner strength had only been cultivated to the point where it could be injected into a weapon. However, no matter what, he could not let his inner strength leave his body. Therefore, although the sword veil looked terrifying, it was in fact just an illusion created by the sword being drawn too quickly. It was not a mass of sword energy that came slashing over. No matter how many illusions there were, no matter how dense the sword veil was, one thing was certain: Gu Yijin only had one sword in his hand. Moreover, this sword could only be in the same position at the same time. Boom! Wei Qingxian did not retreat half a step or dodge. Instead, she threw a punch at the sword veil. In an instant, the force of a mountain surged and the roar of a tiger roared. Wei Qingxian displayed the mountain technique and roaring tiger fist to the highest level of perfection. Clang! There was a flash of silver light and a crisp sound. Wei Qingxuan's fist accurately hit the body of the sword. Wei Qingxian wore a pair of silver gloves on her hands. When she clashed with Gu Yijin's treasured sword, she was not injured at all. Instead, the treasured sword trembled and rebounded. Although Gu Yijin's scorching sun swordsmanship was a high-grade martial arts technique, it was only at the entry level. Other than the exquisite moves, its power was not superior to a middle-grade martial arts technique at the perfection level. Instead, it was slightly inferior. Ha! Wei Qingxian roared and displayed the roaring tiger fist. She immediately launched a fierce counterattack against Gu Yijin. Gu Yijin's inner strength had been depleted by more than half. If he were to engage in a slow battle of attrition, it would instead give the former an opportunity to recover his inner strength. Thus, it was better to launch a series of frenzied attacks that would make it difficult for the latter to parry. That was indeed the case. In the face of Wei Qingxuan's frenzied attacks, Gu Yijin immediately retreated. His momentum instantly weakened as he brandished his sword to block Wei Qingxuan's fist. Clang clang clang, Wei Qingxian threw out a series of punches, all of which were blocked by Gu Yizhan. However, when Wei Qingxian threw out her fifth punch, Gu Yizhan could not circulate it in time due to the intense consumption of his inner strength. He was slower by half a beat and was unable to block it. Boom! Wei Qingxuan's punch landed squarely on Gu Yijin's chest and sent him flying. That surging mountain-like momentum, coupled with the terrifying power of the fist, caused Gu Yijin to spit out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying back more than 10 meters before crashing heavily onto the ground. At this moment, everyone's faces were filled with shock. Previously, Gu Yizhan had threatened to defeat Wei Qingxian in 5 moves, but it turned out to be empty talk. Now, Wei Qingxian had launched a counterattack and defeated Gu Yizhan with only 5 punches. It had to be said that this was a kind of irony. Gu Yizhan had not only lost in strength but also in face. Wei Qingxian wins this round and advances to the 6th round. Gu Jing, who was standing beside the arena, announced the result with a surprised expression. He immediately flashed to Gu Yizhan's side and helped him up. In the pavilion, the leaders of the various factions exclaimed in surprise. However, due to the city lord Gu Cangnan's reputation, no one made any comments. At this moment, only Mu Feng of the Zishan Marquis residence dared to praise Wei Qingxian in front of Gu Cangnan. He said, "This young lady's skills are very good. She's a rare genius of the younger generation." Hearing Mu Feng's praise, Wei Jingguang, who was not far away, was full of smiles, like a blooming chrysanthemum. Gu Cangnan smiled embarrassedly and said, "My son's state of mind is not good. He's made a fool of himself in front of Mr. Mu." Mu Feng had a faint smile on his face and said, "It's good to suffer more setbacks when your state of mind is not good." Gu Cangnan nodded and said, "Mr. Mu's words are reasonable. I hope my son can be taught a lesson." Mu Feng's eyes revealed a strong interest and said, "This trip to Celestial Azure City is really worth it. I've witnessed 2 geniuses of the younger generation. Ha! I'm looking forward to the next match. I wonder how long Yi Xing will take to defeat Xiong Qifeng." The moment these words came out, everyone was shocked. Yi Xing and Xiong Qifeng had not even started fighting yet, but Mu Feng had already made such a certain judgment. It was only a matter of time before Yi Xing defeated Xiong Qifeng. The pavilion was filled with the top figures of Celestial Azure City, but there were very few who agreed with this judgment. Especially Xiong Tyrannosaurus and several Xiong family elders. They were very unhappy when they heard that. Of course, in front of Mu Feng, they did not dare to let out a fart. Gu Cangnan also saw that Yi Xing's strength was not ordinary from the exchange between Yi Xing and Wei Qingyan. But he did not place Yi Xing on the same level as Gu Yijin and Xiong Qifeng. Hearing Mu Feng's judgment, Gu Cangnan could not help being secretly alarmed and said, "Mr. Mu thinks that Yi Xing will win." Mu Feng smiled slightly and waved his hand in the direction of the stage. They've already entered the stage. On the stage, Yi Xing and Xiong Qifeng stood facing each other. Xiong Qifeng and Gu Yijin were equally famous. Gu Yijin's defeat made him feel like they were in the same boat, and he was unhappy in his heart. Especially when he recalled Yi Yunlong said to him before that he would also be surpassed by the rising stars. Wei Qingxian defeated Gu Yijin, and in other people's eyes, she vaguely also defeated him. This made Xiong Qifeng even more depressed. Xiong Qifeng, will never be surpassed by the rising stars. Never. Xiong Qifeng said in his heart. He looked at Yi Xing with a fierce gaze. He wanted to use Yi Xing to prove his strength as a proud son of heaven. Therefore, after the two entered the stage, Xiong Qifeng did not say a word. He directly unsheathed his treasured saber and attacked Yi Xing. He wanted to cut the Gordian knot and severely injure Yixing. As soon as Xiong Qifeng attacked, he used his most proficient martial skill, which was also the Xiong family's unique skill, the 24 moves mountain cleaving saber technique. The saber light was dazzling white, like silver frost, as it violently slashed at Yixing. When Gui Jin attacked Wei Qingxian, even if he was angered towards the end, it was only to defeat Wei Qingxian. He did not have the intention to severely injure Wei Qingxian. As for Xiong Qifeng, he did not have the slightest fear of injuring Yixing. His saber went straight for Yixing's vital points. Even if he would cut off Yixing's head with a single strike, Xiong Qifeng would never stop. In Xiong Qifeng's heart, it was not that he did not have the intention to kill Yixing on the stage, but he was afraid that there would not be such an opportunity. Naturally, he would not show any mercy. Seeing how ruthless Xiong Qifeng was, quite a few people around the square were shocked, and cries of alarm rang out. In the pavilion, the various big shots of Celestial Azure City were also surprised, but their expressions were different. Xiong Baolong sneered inwardly. It would be best if Xiong Qifeng could cut down Yixing with his saber. The Xiong family had Xiong Qixing in Indigo Mountain Academy's genius class, and he had connections with big shots in Indigo Mountain Academy. Xiong Baolong believed that even if he killed Yixing, with Xiong Qixing's connections in Indigo Mountain Academy, Mu Feng would not punish Xiong Qifeng too harshly. However, Xiong Baolong did not see that at this moment, Mu Feng's eyes were slightly narrowed, hiding a murderous intent. The main purpose of Indigo Mountain Academy's recruitment was to discover the younger generation's geniuses from all over the world. It was forbidden to kill during the competition. And Yixing was the younger generation's genius that Mu Feng had his eyes on. If he was killed in front of his eyes, then the murderer would not be able to live. However, Mu Feng's murderous intent was hidden, and outsiders could not see it. He also did not have any intention of stopping him. He was a peak 8th-stage martial master. How could he not see that Yixing was much stronger than Xiong Qifeng? Even if Xiong Qifeng suddenly attacked Yixing madly, using poison and killing moves, he would not be able to do anything to Yixing. Mu Feng was not wrong at all. The 7-star steps was originally a mid-grade movement technique with the fastest reaction speed. The 7-star steps at the transformation stage was even more terrifying than the butterfly dance steps at the transformation stage. No matter how fast, and ruthless Xiong Qifeng's saber attacks were, they could not even touch the corner of Yixing's clothes. After 3 consecutive saber attacks, Xiong Qifeng knew that he was in the same situation as Gui Jin. Yixing's movement technique attainments were as shocking as Wei Qingxuan's. If he continued attacking like this, even if Xiong Qifeng died of exhaustion, he would not be able to touch the corner of his clothes. After only 3 moves of the 24 moves of the mountain-splitting saber technique, Xiong Qifeng's saber technique changed, and the saber light suddenly became like the moon. High-grade martial technique, Waning Moon Saber Technique. Waning Moon Saber Technique was the complete high-grade martial technique of the Xiong family. The complete here did not refer to the martial technique's mnemonic chant, but to the cultivation experience. Because of this, the difficulty of cultivating Waning Moon Saber Technique was much lower than the incomplete high-grade martial techniques of the Wei and Yi families. Not only did Xiong Qifeng successfully cultivate Waning Moon Saber Technique, his attainments were even more profound than Gui Jin's Scorching Sun Sword Technique. Moreover, Xiong Qifeng's cultivation was also a step higher than Gui Jin's. A few days ago, he had reached the late 6th stage. Xiong Qifeng was very sure that Yixing could not dodge his Waning Moon Saber Technique, nor could he block it. His attack power from below was definitely stronger than Gui Jin's. Even if he encountered Wei Qingxian, Xiong Qifeng was not afraid at all. Soft bone palm. Yixing's hands were like snakes, meeting the saber light that was like moonlight. He wore a pair of black and gold silk gloves on his hands. Yixing first deflected his opponent's power, then clasped his hands together, clamping the treasured saber. His bones were completely cultivated, and his physical strength was stronger than Wei Qingxuan's. Coupled with his vigorous inner strength, the clasping of his hands was like an iron clamp clamping down on the treasured saber. In an instant, the treasured saber was fixed between his hands. No matter how hard Xiong Qifeng pressed down, he could not chop down. Xiong Qifeng roared and fiercely pulled out the saber. Yixing's hands clamped down on the saber, and his body suddenly became light. He flew forward with the treasured saber that Xiong Qifeng pulled back. Then, his legs kicked fiercely. Middle-grade martial technique, wind-chasing kick. The wind-chasing kick that incorporated the power of the wind was as fast as a phantom, and Xiong Qifeng was immediately kicked. Yixing took a deep breath and fiercely kicked several times, one of which hit the heart. Xiong Qifeng immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, suffering heavy injuries. His hands let go of the saber's hilt, and he staggered back, shock in his eyes. He never expected that he would be heavily injured by Yixing after using a high-grade martial technique. All the spectators were also dumbfounded, their hearts thumping. They did not expect that Yixing and Xiong Qifeng's battle would also end in the victory of a fifth-stage martial artist. The two proud sons of heaven of Celestial Azure City were actually both defeated by a rising star. This indeed made many martial artists feel incredulous. From now on, Gu Yijin and Xiong Qijin could no longer be called proud sons of heaven. Among the younger generation of Celestial Azure City, only Yixing and Wei Qingxian, these two rising stars, could be called the twin prides. Just as the martial artists were shocked and exclaiming, an extremely shrill scream suddenly came from the arena. Chapter 74. It turned out that Xiong Qifeng had waved his hand as he staggered backwards. Whoosh! 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 In an instant, 3 cold lights shot out, aiming at 3 vital points on Yixing's body. They were hidden weapons. Hidden weapons were despised by righteous martial artists. In order to win, Xiong Qifeng had used hidden weapons in front of everyone. Moreover, the hidden weapons were aimed at Yixing's vital points. If they hit, he would die. Humph! Yixing snorted. He stepped on the Big Dipper and moved like a phantom. In the blink of an eye, he dodged all 3 hidden weapons and appeared in front of Xiong Qifeng. Middle-grade martial skill, pulse-cutting palm. Yixing moved like lightning. In the blink of an eye, he had slapped Xiong Qifeng's body 10 times. Xiong Qifeng immediately let out a mournful scream, spitting out blood as he was sent flying by Yixing. In the blink of an eye. From the moment Xiong Qifeng had attacked Yixing with hidden weapons to Yixing dodging and injuring Xiong Qifeng, it had all happened in the blink of an eye. Most martial artists were still in shock from Yixing's kick injuring Xiong Qifeng. They hadn't reacted yet. Now, Xiong Qifeng had been seriously injured, spitting out blood as he flew. No, it wasn't just a serious injury. The pulse-cutting palm was an extremely vicious martial skill. Yixing's pulse-cutting palm had been cultivated to the perfection stage, and its destructive power was astonishing. The places where Yixing had struck Xiong Qifeng's meridians had all been broken. A martial artist's internal strength was based on their meridians. If their meridians were destroyed, their internal strength would be lost. From then on, they would be a cripple. Xiong Qifeng was a 6th-level martial artist. Ordinary injuries, even serious injuries, were something he could endure. Only injuries like broken meridians, whether it was physical or mental, caused him to let out such a mournful scream. The moment his meridians broke, Xiong Qifeng's eyes were filled with shock, sadness, disbelief, and finally despair. Xiong Qifeng was thrown more than 10 meters away. His whole body was in severe pain and he couldn't get up. Yixing stood in the middle of the square with his left hand clenched into a fist behind his back. He was like a deep abyss with a majestic aura. Glancing at Xiong Qifeng, Yixing's eyes were resolute. The Purple Mountain Academy's recruitment competition was the biggest event that happened once every 3 years in Celestial Azure City. It received the attention of all the martial artists in Celestial Azure City. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, Yixing was not willing to be so heavy-handed. Even though Xiong Qifeng's saber had been ruthless, Yixing had only intended to seriously injure him, and had never thought of crippling his martial path. However, Xiong Qifeng's attempt to kill Yixing with a concealed weapon had thoroughly infuriated him. Since you started it, don't blame me for returning the favor. Yixing naturally returned the favor with a heavy gift. If it wasn't for the fact that he was concerned about the reputation of the big shots from the prefecture city and didn't want to violate the rules of the recruitment competition, Yixing would not have just crippled Xiong Qifeng. He would have returned the favor to Xiong Qifeng and taken his life. Yixing's attack was so fast that the martial artists around the square couldn't see clearly what martial technique Yixing had used. They were only shocked by Xiong Qifeng's shrill scream, not knowing what kind of injury Xiong Qifeng had suffered. From the fact that Xiong Qifeng had fallen to the ground and could only groan in pain without moving, it could be seen that Xiong Qifeng had indeed suffered extremely serious injuries. Many of the big shots in the pavilion naturally saw the martial technique Yixing had used. Especially the LV7 martial Dao masters, they saw it very clearly. Xiong Baolong and the other elders of the Xiong family all changed their expressions at this moment. Their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as they all stood up with a swoosh. What a vicious little bastard! How dare you use such a vicious move in front of everyone? You're courting death. Xiong Baolong roared and was about to rush down the pavilion. Looking at his momentum, it seemed like he wanted to go up the arena and kill Yixing Pa. With a startled sound, the temperature in the entire loft seemed to have plummeted. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Xiong Baolong felt a terrifying aura locking onto him. Suddenly, all the hairs on his body stood up. He was shocked and didn't dare to move. The sound came from Mu Feng's slap on the table. His gaze didn't look at Xiong Baolong and the others. He only glanced at Gu Tsangnan indifferently. Lord Gu, there are people in your Tiansang city who don't put me in their eyes. Mu Feng's tone was very calm and the speed of his words was also very gentle. However, everyone in the pavilion felt an inexplicable chill and their bodies turned cold. Gu Tsangnan's face changed. He swept his gaze at Xiong Bao Tian and stood up angrily. Presumptuous. The Zishan Academy's recruitment competition is all decided by Mr. Mu. In front of Mr. Mu, it's not your Xiong family's turn to overstep your authority. Why haven't you stepped down yet? Although the Yi, Wei, and Xiong families were the strongest in Tiansang City, there was another force that was even more terrifying. That was the City Lord's mansion. The City Lord's mansion was directly under the jurisdiction of the Zishan Marquis Mansion. It was the official force under the Zishan Marquis. Although it didn't participate in the dispute of martial arts, its status was superior. Of course, the City Lord's mansion had to maintain a good relationship with the local powerful families to manage the city. Normally, Gu Tsangnan was very friendly to the Yi, Wei, and Xiong families. However, Mu Feng, who came from the Zishan Marquis Mansion, was very angry. Compared to Mu Feng, the Xiong family was not worth mentioning in Gu Tsangnan's eyes. How could he be nice to the Xiong family? After angrily rebuking Xiong Bao Tian, Gu Tsangnan cupped his fists and bowed slightly to Mu Feng. Mr. Mu, please calm down. Patriarch Xiong lost control of his emotions because of the injury of his junior. He didn't mean to offend Mr. Mu's dignity. Gu Tsangnan's words were smooth and tactful. Originally, Xiong Bao Tian felt humiliated by his public rebuke and was resentful. Now that Gu Tsangnan spoke up for him, his resentment towards Gu Tsangnan naturally dissipated in the blink of an eye. Xiong Baolong followed Gu Tsangnan's words and said, "It is as Lord Gu said." I was worried about my junior and lost control of my emotions. I hope Mr. Mu can forgive me. After apologizing to Mu Feng, Xiong Baolong continued, Mr. Mu, Yixing acted viciously in front of everyone during the recruitment competition. He deliberately injured others and crippled Xiong Qifeng's martial arts. If such a vicious act is not severely punished, how can the public be convinced? At this point, Xiong Baolong's eyes revealed a ruthless look. I suggest that we give him a taste of his own medicine. Yixing used the pulse-cutting hand to break Xiong Qifeng's meridians and cripple his martial arts. Let him taste the feeling of having his meridians broken and his martial arts crippled. Yuan Dao was furious when he heard this. He stood up and said, Xiong Baolong, don't slander others. You know in your heart who acted viciously. Xiong Baolong was about to fight back when Mu Feng waved his hand to stop him. He said, I have eyes. I can see the truth for myself. I don't need anyone to point it out. As he spoke, Mu Feng stood up and walked step by step to the edge of the pavilion. He could see the entire square below. Mu Feng continued, Xiong Qifeng acted viciously and openly used hidden weapons in the recruitment competition. He violated the competition rules and the situation is bad. He committed a heinous crime and should be severely punished. Yixing crippled his martial arts, well done. He should be crippled. Mu Feng spoke very loudly. Even many of the martial artists in the plaza heard him. Naturally, the people in the pavilion could hear him clearly. Xiong Baolong's body trembled and his face turned pale. The expressions of the Xiong family elders also changed greatly. Their Xiong family had a junior genius, Xiong Qisheng, in the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class. Furthermore, he had been accepted as a personal disciple by the vice principal. The vice principal of the Purple Mountain Academy was an extraordinary figure. He was at least a martial grandmaster of the 9th level of the martial path or even a half-step martial saint. Xiong Qisheng had been accepted as a personal disciple by such an important figure. It could be said that his future was limitless. In the eyes of the Xiong family, with such a relationship, Mu Feng, who came from Purple Mountain County City, should give them face. However, this was clearly not the case. The Xiong family only knew part of the situation in Purple Mountain County City. Although Purple Mountain Marquis was the master of the Purple Mountain Marquis residence and the vice principal of the Purple Mountain Academy, the Purple Mountain Marquis residence and Purple Mountain Academy were two independent institutions. The vice principal of the Purple Mountain Academy was a super important figure, but even he could not control the Purple Mountain Marquis residence. The reason why the Purple Mountain Academy was in charge of teaching students and the Purple Mountain Marquis residence was in charge of recruiting students was not without reason. It was to prevent certain forces or warriors from using their connections in the academy to suppress other geniuses in the process of recruiting students, resulting in the loss of talent. With the Purple Mountain Marquis residence in charge of recruiting students, the connections in the Purple Mountain Academy were useless. Mu Feng's task was to find talents for Purple Mountain Marquis. Naturally, he could not miss out on the geniuses of the younger generation. How could he suppress Yixing because of the Xiong family's relationship? No, this is not fair. Yixing and Xiong Qifeng were ruthless. Why is Yixing safe and sound? This is not fair. Violent Bear could not accept the result that Yixing was safe and sound. He still had hope for Xiong Qisheng's relationship in the Purple Mountain Academy. Mu Feng turned around, 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes. He stared at Violent Bear and said word by word, why? Do you want me to explain it to you? That cold aura once again spread throughout the pavilion, causing many experts to shiver. Violent Bear bore the brunt of it, and the feeling was even more intense. A terrifying sense of fear welled up in his heart. He had a feeling that Mu Feng already wanted to kill him. If he angered the other party, it was very likely that he would be killed. Thinking of a peak 8th rank martial Dao master making a move, Violent Bear broke out in cold sweat. Facing Mu Feng's terrifying aura, Violet Bear could not help but take a few steps back and said, "I dare not. I dare not." The light in Mu Feng's eyes faded. Since the other party had admitted defeat, he naturally had no interest in making a move. If they did not comply, Mu Feng did not mind making a move. He would kill Violet Bear in front of everyone and see who else would dare to talk nonsense. "Continue," Mu Feng said indifferently and returned to his seat. Gu Zhangnan let out a sigh of relief. As the Azure Sky City Lord, he naturally did not want anything to happen here. The recruitment competition continued. Xiong Qifeng was carried off the stage, while Yixing remained standing on the stage. Without needing Gu Jing to announce the name list for the 6th round, Wei Qingxian took the initiative to enter the stage. There was only one match in the 6th round, and that was the finals for the first place. Chapter 75. Zishan County had a total of 68 cities. Apart from the county capital, the other 67 cities were of different sizes. However, the number of students that Zishan Academy recruited was the same, 10. The county capital was the center of power and economy in Zishan County. It was also the most prosperous area for martial arts. There were countless top-notch martial arts families, and the number of students they had was a lot more than the 67 ordinary cities. In other words, Zishan Academy had a total of 770 students. Of these 770 students, 700 were in the ordinary class, and 70 were in the genius class. Of the 70 geniuses, the county capital had 30, and the other 67 cities only had 40. On average, each city had less than one genius class student. In other words, even the number 1 genius of a certain city only had a 70% chance of being accepted into the genius class. If the number 1 genius only had a 70% chance, the second-place chance was close to none. Zishan Academy recruited 2 geniuses from the same city in the same batch of students. This was something that only happened once in 10 years. Therefore, to enter the genius class, winning first place in the recruitment competition was the prerequisite. Because of this, Yixing and Wei Qingxian both wanted to win first place. Especially Yixing. He was only a 2-star Heaven's Mandate. It was impossible for him to enter the genius class based on his aptitude, so he could only rely on his strength. The entire square was silent. All the martial artists' gazes fell on Yixing and Wei Qingxian on the stage. Before the recruitment competition started, Xiong Qifeng and Gu Yijian were the 2 most popular candidates for first place. Who would have thought that Xiong Qifeng and Gu Yijian would be defeated by these 2 rising stars, and in the end, it was Yixing and Wei Qingxian who would fight for first place. It was precisely because no one had expected this outcome that it attracted everyone's interest. No one could guess who would obtain first place in the end. In the arena, Yixing and Wei Qingxian looked at each other. Wei Qingxian said, "Thank you for your help in the Emerald Cloud Mountain Range. However, I won't let you win in the recruitment competition." Yixing smiled and said, "Junior of the Celestial Firmament City, my only true opponent is you. If I were to give way, the battle would be too boring." Wei Qingxian also smiled and said, "That's right, I also only see you as a true opponent. I hope you will also do your best, and we will have a good fight." When the cultivators heard the conversation between the 2 of them, they were secretly shocked. It turned out that Yixing and Wei Qingxian had long known of each other's strength and only regarded each other as opponents. As for the other cultivators, no one had realized how strong the 2 of them were before. Gu Yijian's face also heated up when he heard this, thinking of how arrogant he was when he fought Wei Qingxian, but the other party did not see him as an opponent at all. He could not help but sigh and reflect on himself. As for Xiong Qifeng, he was already a cripple. His heart had completely collapsed, and his eyes were filled with despair. He was already immune to these words of shock, and was even drunk in despair. He did not hear what Yixing and Wei Qingxian said at all. Yixing did not care about the other cultivator's size, and said, "If I go all out, my strength will be very terrifying. You have to be careful." Wei Qingxian blinked and said, "How terrifying will it be? My middle-grade body refining cultivation method, martial skills, and movement technique have reached perfection. I have also grasped a high-grade martial skill, and I have also comprehended a trace of wind force. Will a peak 5th level cultivation be enough to contend against you?" Yixing was slightly moved. He was able to learn a high-grade martial skill because of the super brain, but Wei Qingxian was truly talented in martial arts. The Wei family's high-grade martial skill was also incomplete. Wei Qingxian was actually able to learn it with a cultivation of the 5th level of the martial path. It could be seen that she was indeed a top martial arts genius who could not be more monstrous. Yixing said, "My martial arts attainments are on par with yours, and my cultivation is at the late 5th level. It seems that my cultivation is a small level lower than yours, and I am slightly inferior. However, my strength has never been based on cultivation realm and martial arts attainments on the surface. The outcome of a battle was not only based on the hard indicators of strength, but also a hidden factor, combat skills. It wasn't unusual for a weak person to be able to defeat a strong person with powerful combat skills. However, combat skills were a person's ability to react and judge. It was extremely mysterious and difficult to describe. However, there was no doubt that Yixing had the super brain, and his combat skills were undoubtedly extremely high. The super brain scanning allowed them to accurately know the opponent's attack trajectory, speed, and changes. It allowed him to almost have the ability to predict the opponent's movements. This was the key to him being able to defeat the strong as the weak. The two of them did not say much and quickly began to fight. Wei Qingxian executed the butterfly dance steps, and her entire body was like a dancing butterfly. It was extremely beautiful, and nothing more beautiful. However, her speed seemed slow, but in fact, it was extremely fast. Yixing's 7-star steps was also at the perfection stage. Whether it was in terms of physique or footwork, Yixing was worlds apart from Wei Qingxian. However, in terms of speed, Yixing was not inferior at all. In fact, Yixing's 7-star steps was even more unpredictable, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Bang, 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 bang. The two of them were extremely fast, and when they fought, they were as fast as lightning. Most of the martial artists did not see how the two of them attacked. They only knew that when the two of them met, there was a series of explosions, proving that the process of the fight was extremely intense. Bronze art, perfection. Mountain art, perfection. Both of their body tempering techniques were at the perfection stage. The bronze art was strong in physical strength, while the mountain art was strong in aura suppression. When they fought, they were evenly matched. The martial arts that the two of them used were also at the perfection stage, and their power was equally matched. Yixing did not use the super brain to scan. In terms of combat awareness, Wei Qingxian was about the same as him. It was difficult to tell who was better. Furthermore, although Yixing's bones were complete, and he had the advantage in terms of physical collision, Wei Qingxuan's cultivation was higher than Yixing's by a small level. Her inner strength was slightly better, so they were still evenly matched. The two of them fought very quickly. Not long after, they had already exchanged more than 30 moves. They had already used several middle-grade martial arts, but they were still evenly matched. The audience in the square was dazzled by the two's battle, but most of the important figures in the pavilion could still see it clearly, and their eyes were filled with surprise. Even the two martial Dao masters, Mu Feng and Gu Tsangnan, nodded their heads. Mu Feng's eyes were filled with satisfaction. In terms of the use of middle-grade martial arts, the two of them had reached an extremely high level, almost touching the perfection stage. In terms of the use of movement techniques, they were truly at the perfection stage. Many of the older generation of 6th-level martial artists could not be compared to the two of them even if they practiced martial arts for their entire lives. As for movement techniques, not to mention 6th-level martial artists, even martial Dao masters who could cultivate a middle-grade movement technique to the perfection stage were extremely rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. Yixing and Wei Qingxuan's eyes were shining brightly. The more they fought, the more excited they became, and the more they fought, the more carefree they felt. In life, it was rare to find an opponent who was on par with them. If the opponent was stronger than them, they would be suppressed everywhere. If the opponent was weaker than them, they would not be able to pose a threat. Only when an opponent who was on par with them was a great threat to them, but would not suppress them, would they be able to continuously stimulate their potential in the process of a carefree battle. Yixing was currently enjoying this carefree battle. He could feel that in the process of fighting with Wei Qingxian, his attainments in martial arts had become more and more skilled. This was a feeling that he had never experienced when he was cultivating or fighting with an ordinary opponent. Because of this, Yixing did not use the super brain scanning function to break this state of balance. This was an excellent opportunity to hone his attainments in martial arts, and he could not miss it. Wei Qingxian was the same. Therefore, even though she did not have the upper hand, she did not use a high-grade martial arts technique in the 30 or so moves with Yixing. The current state of balance was the most mysterious. It was extremely beneficial to both of their attainments in martial arts, and neither of them wanted to break it. Didn't the two of them say that they had learned high-grade martial arts techniques? Why haven't they used them after fighting for so long? Yes, it's really strange. It seems that the two of them are very close in strength. If they use high-grade martial arts techniques, as long as their attainments in martial arts are higher, wouldn't they be able to determine the winner? Could it be that they actually don't know high-grade martial arts techniques? Could it be that they were lying just now? Their purpose is to destroy each other's confidence. Seeing that Yixing and Wei Qingxian had already exchanged 30 or 40 moves and had yet to use high-grade martial arts techniques, many martial artists began to discuss. Although they could not see clearly the battle between Yixing and Wei Qingxian, they could still see that the two of them were using middle-grade martial arts techniques. They could also see that the two of them were evenly matched, and neither of them had the upper hand. Even some of the big shots in the pavilion had the same doubts. Other than Mu Feng and Gu Zhangnan, the two martial Dao masters, and a few 7th-level martial Dao masters, who could see that the two of them were honing their martial arts techniques, even the big shots at the peak of the 6th level could not see it. Very quickly, Yixing and Wei Qingxian had exchanged 50 moves. At this moment, Wei Qingxuan's martial arts technique changed from a middle-grade martial arts technique to an inferior-grade martial arts technique. Inferior-grade martial arts technique, stone-splitting palm. Stone-splitting palm was similar to mountain-splitting palm, but it was a grade lower. The profoundness and power of the moves were far inferior to mountain-splitting palm. Seeing that Wei Qingxian had suddenly used an inferior-grade martial arts technique, most of the martial artists were shocked. Just now, Wei Qingxian had used a middle-grade martial arts technique at the perfection stage and was only evenly matched with Yixing. Now that he had switched to an inferior-grade martial arts technique, how could he block it? Wasn't that just courting defeat? However, the result was out of many martial artists' expectations. Bang 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 bang. After a series of explosions, Wei Qingxian used the stone-splitting palm and engaged in an intense collision with Yixing. He was not at a disadvantage at all. In fact, after exchanging a few moves, Yixing was even forced to take a step back and faintly showed signs of being at a disadvantage. Many martial artists sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, they finally understood. Transformative stage. Oh my god, Wei Qingxian has mastered an inferior-grade martial arts technique to the transformative stage. Someone exclaimed in shock. It was extremely difficult to master a martial arts technique to the perfection stage, not to mention the transformative stage. Even if it was an inferior grade martial arts technique, other than martial Dao masters of the 7th level and above, no martial artists below the 7th level were able to master an inferior grade martial arts technique to the transformative stage. However, what shocked the martial artists even more was that Wei Qingxian had switched to an inferior grade martial arts technique at the transformative stage. After exchanging 10 moves with Yixing, Yixing suddenly switched to an inferior grade martial arts technique as well. Transformative stage again. Just over 200 recommendation votes away from breaking the 10,000 recommendation votes for this week. Brothers, will you be able to break it today? Or will you be able to break it? Or will you be able to break it? Chapter 76. After Wei Qingxian used an inferior martial technique, Yixing had fallen into a disadvantageous position. However, when Yixing also used an inferior martial technique, he reversed the situation in one fell swoop. He was once again on par with Wei Qingxian. The two people in the battle had joy in their eyes. Many cultivators thought that Yixing and Wei Qingxian had already cultivated the inferior martial technique to the perfection stage and only used it now. However, the two of them were very clear that they had continuously stimulated their potential in the process of the battle. They had finally comprehended the inferior martial technique to the perfection stage. The perfection stage referred to cultivating a martial technique to the acme of perfection. It possessed unimaginable power. Therefore, even if it was an inferior martial technique, once it reached the perfection stage, it would become extremely powerful. It was much stronger than a mid-grade martial technique at the perfection stage. Usually, only a martial Dao master in the 7th stage would be able to cultivate an inferior martial technique to the perfection stage after cultivating a large amount of martial techniques. Therefore, once a cultivator at the peak of the 6th stage cultivated an inferior martial technique to the perfection stage, it meant that they had opened the door to the martial Dao master realm. Yixing and Wei Qingxian were only in the 5th stage of the martial Dao, but this door had already been opened. For those who opened this door, it would be much easier for them to break through to the 7th stage of the martial Dao than other cultivators. Even if Yixing was only a 2-star Destiny Realm cultivator, there was still a high chance that he could become a martial Dao master after opening this door. In the pavilion, Mu Feng looked at the two people fighting in the arena. His gaze was filled with admiration. He naturally knew that Yixing and Wei Qingxian had comprehended the inferior grade martial skill to the transformation stage during the battle. He was only in the 5th stage of the martial path, yet he was able to open the door to becoming a martial master. Such a talent was rare in the history of the Purple Mountain Academy. Even Mu Feng himself, a martial Dao Grand Master who had reached the peak of LV8 at the age of 30, had only opened this door when he was at the late stage of LV6. The battle between Yixing and Wei Qingxian had yet to end, but Mu Feng had already made a decision in his heart. Regardless of the outcome, both of them would be recruited into the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class. On the side, Gu Zhangnan noticed Mu Feng's expression and guessed the latter's intentions. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Every time the Purple Mountain Academy recruited a student from the genius class, it would be a huge debt to the city lord and they would be rewarded by the Purple Mountain Marquis Mansion. If there were 2 students from the genius class, then they would definitely stand out among the 67 ordinary cities. They would be valued by the Purple Mountain Marquis Mansion and have a great future. Time slowly passed by. On the arena, Yixing and Wei Qingxian executed their inferior grade martial skills and exchanged over 100 moves. Piercing Flower Hand, Chain Palm, Raging Steel Fist, Stone Splitting Palm, Shadowless Leg, Great Monument Hand. One inferior grade martial skill after another was executed by Yixing and Wei Qingxian. Without exception, the inferior grade martial skills that the two of them executed were all at the transformation stage. Ever since the first inferior grade martial skill was comprehended to the transformation stage, the two of them were like a river that had burst its banks. Their comprehension of the inferior grade martial skills was unstoppable. As the battle continued, the two of them comprehended one inferior grade martial skill after another to the transformation stage. Towards the end, even Mu Feng and Gu Zhangnan, the two martial Dao masters, were surprised. Yixing and Wei Qingxuan's progress was too fast. One inferior grade martial skill after another was executed. It almost looked like a battle between two martial Dao masters. The ordinary spectators around the square were naturally even more shocked. They had an illusion that the people fighting in the arena were two martial Dao masters. It was shocking. Although Yixing and Wei Qingxian had been fighting for a long time, no one felt bored. Instead, their hearts tightened as they paid attention to the changes in the arena. After nearly 200 moves, Yixing and Wei Qingxian finally stopped. After the last exchange, the two of them dodged and stood more than 10 meters apart. Both of their inferior grade martial skills had already reached the transformation stage. Even a martial Dao master could not cultivate a middle-grade martial skill to the transformation stage. The difficulty was too high. It was impossible for the two of them to make so much progress in such a short period of time. Therefore, it was meaningless to continue fighting. The two of them stopped this kind of evenly matched fight and prepared to determine the winner. Wei Qingxian was preparing to use an superior grade martial skill to launch a thunderous attack. Yixing did not intend to use an superior grade martial skill, but he had already used the super brain scanning function to sweep Wei Qingxuan's figure into his mind. He was preparing to use an inferior grade martial skill of the transformation stage to break his opponent's superior grade martial skill. However, before the two of them could exchange blows, a burst of applause came from the pavilion. It was Mu Feng who stood up and clapped his hands, praising, "Yixing, Wei Qingxian, the two of you are rare prodigies of the younger generation in Zishan County. There is no need to compete anymore. The two of you can enter Zishan Academy's genius class together." The two of them on the arena looked at each other in surprise. The two of them entering the genius class together was undoubtedly the best result. The martial artists around the square, after a short moment of shock, erupted into earth-shattering cheers. In the same batch of enrollment, the same city had produced two genius class students. This was a rare occurrence in the entire Zishan County's 67 cities. This was a kind of glory, enough to show disdain for the other 66 cities. Therefore, all the martial artists in Tiansang City were overjoyed when they heard Mu Feng's words. Especially the martial artists of the Ya family and Wei family. They were overjoyed. For their family to produce a genius class student, it was a great thing for their family. The feeling of glory was even stronger than other martial artists. Of course, not everyone was overjoyed with this result. For example, the martial artists of the Xiong family, or some of the martial arts families that had close relations with the Xiong family, frowned slightly when they saw that Yixing had also been recruited into Zishan Academy's genius class. They were very unhappy in their hearts. However, recruiting Yixing into the genius class was Mu Feng's decision. Even if there were people who were unhappy, no one dared to say a word. They could only swallow their displeasure in their hearts. Therefore, in the pavilion, Yi Wendao and Wei Jingguang were all smiles, unable to contain their joy. As for Xiong Baolong, his face was ashen, and he had a bitter expression. "Ha! Congratulations to Ya family patriarch, Wei family patriarch, the younger generation has entered Zishan Academy's genius class. This is the #1 blessing, congratulations." Gu Zhangnan stood up and congratulated Yi Wendao and Wei Jingguang. He said, "This Gu must also thank the two patriarchs for nurturing such an outstanding junior. Haha, for Tiansang City to produce two genius class students in one batch, this Gu also feels proud and honored." Honored. Yi Wendao and Wei Jingguang also hurriedly stood up. both of them were overjoyed in their hearts. Their faces were full of smiles as they replied to Gutsongnon. Naturally, their words were not arrogant. Instead, they also complimented the city lord Gu. Both sides were full of smiles and joy. To the side, Xiong Baolong felt as if he had eaten a fly. Xiong Baolong said without batting an eyelid, according to the customs of Tiansang City, students who enter the genius class can leave their names on the plaque of names. Ha! I wonder how Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian are ranked compared to the previous geniuses of Tiansang City. On the plaque of names, Xiong Qixing's name was high and mighty. It even surpassed the peerless genius of the Ya family 100 years ago, Yi Tianjue. This was something that the Xiong family was most proud of. Right now, Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian had both been accepted into the genius class. Their popularity was at its peak. Xiong Baolong thought about it again. Perhaps only the comparison on the plaque of names would be able to suppress the two's limelight. 3 years ago, Xiong Qixing stood out from the crowd in the recruitment competition. At the age of 16, his cultivation was at the peak of the 6th rank. He swept his peers and won first place, and was accepted into the Purple Mountain Institute's genius class. At that time, Xiong Qixing had cultivated his middle-grade Qinggong to the great perfection realm. In addition, his inner strength was abundant. When he left his name on the plaque of names, he surpassed Yi Tianjue in one fell swoop, shocking all the martial artists. From then on, the Xiong family was publicly acknowledged as the #1 martial arts family in Tiansang City. Now, as long as Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian left their names on the plaque of names, Xiong Qixing, who was at the highest spot, would naturally be noticed by all the martial artists. They would recall Xiong Qixing's glorious deeds from 3 years ago. At that time, everyone would probably sigh and say, Xiong Qixing of the Xiong family is indeed the #1 genius in the history of Tiansang City. No one can compare to him. In this way, Yi Xing and Wei Qingxuan's popularity would naturally drop, while Xiong Qixing's prestige would be further consolidated. Leaving one's name on the plaque of names was indeed the custom of Tiansang City. Although Gutsongnon understood the meaning behind Tyrannical Bear's words, he could only let Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian leave their names on the plaque of names as usual. Under the plaque of names, Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian were the center of attention. Their eyes were filled with confidence. Their middle-grade Qinggong was at the great perfection realm, and they had also comprehended a trace of wind force. Once they merged with the wind force, they would be able to stand at the perfection realm. Surpassing everyone on the plaque of names was not a problem at all. However, the others did not know of their Qinggong attainments, and did not dare to guess that their movement techniques had been cultivated to the perfection realm. Even their Qinggong was at the perfection realm. Tyrannical Bear's face was gloomy, but he was secretly laughing in his heart. Wait until your names are suppressed by the strange saint. Let's see how you can still be in the limelight. Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian first looked at all the names on the plaque of names. They chose the spot they wanted to leave their names on, and then looked at each other. Let's do it together. The two said at the same time, and then they laughed at their tacit understanding. Whoosh! Whoosh! One used the flying swan technique, while the other used the wind-stepping technique. Their bodies leaped up, and in the blink of an eye, they had leaped more than 10 feet. At this moment, the two of them merged with the wind force at the same time, and their inner strength exploded. Their speed suddenly continued to soar, and in the blink of an eye, they had rushed up another 60 to 70 feet. Exclamations sounded from all around. Tyrannical Bear was dumbfounded. Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian had actually reached the same height as Xiong Qixing. However, their goal was not only to reach this height. Middle-grade Qinggong of the perfection realm was naturally extraordinary. The two of them circulated their inner strength for the second time, and their bodies actually leaped up several feet again. All the martial artists' expressions changed. Yixing and Wei Qingxian had actually reached the top of the plaque of names, and they were 20 feet above the ground. Just as the crowd was still in shock, the two of them made their moves and left their names on the plaque of names. Yixing, Wei Qingxian. In the blink of an eye, the two names were high up on the top of the plaque of names. On Monday, I really need recommendation votes to get into the rankings. Can I get more than 2,000 votes today? Please give me a recommendation vote. Chapter 77. Yixing's name was one character shorter than Wei Qingxuan's. It was simpler and required less time to engrave. When Yixing finished engraving the two characters, Yixing, Wei Qingxian had just started engraving the third character, Xian. At this moment, Yixing's heart skipped a beat. The corner of his mouth curled up. After engraving the last horizontal line of Yixing, he didn't stop. Instead, he dragged a long horizontal line and continued to draw to the side. Yixing's foot kicked off the monument of names. His body moved about 10 feet to the side and came to Wei Qingxuan's side. As for the last stroke, Yixing naturally dragged it out for more than 10 feet. Then, it connected with the first stroke of the character Wei. At this moment, Wei Qingxian had just finished engraving the third character when she heard Yixing's soft laughter. To prevent future generations from engraving their names between us, I might as well take the space in the middle first. Hee hee. At this moment, Wei Qingxian realized that Yixing had actually connected their names together. This gave her a subtle feeling in her heart. It wasn't anger, nor was it joy. She just felt that since both of them had entered Zishan Academy's gifted class at the same time, it would be a good memory to leave their names together. After the two of them finished engraving, the second flow of inner strength was used up. Even with the transformative realm's Qinggong, it was difficult to use a third flow of inner strength. The two of them floated down and landed on the ground not long after. Thunderous applause immediately rang out in the square. Yixing and Wei Qingxian had both carved their names at the very top of the name monument. There was no monument above them, so they could be considered to have reached the very top. This completely shocked all the martial artists present to the point that they were completely convinced. They couldn't help but clap their hands and praise them. From this moment onwards, the record of Celestial Azure City was refreshed. There was a new legend. Xiong Qixing's first place on the Fame Monument only lasted for 3 years before being trampled by Yixing and Wei Qingxian. More importantly, Yixing and Wei Qingxian were only at the 5th stage of the martial path. 3 years ago, Xiong Qixing had participated in the recruitment competition and was at the peak of the 6th stage of the martial path. In comparison, Yixing and Wei Qingxian were extraordinary geniuses. Of course, between the two of them, Wei Qingxian was even more shocking. Although Yixing had overshadowed Xiong Qixing's limelight on the Fame Monument, he was about the same age as Xiong Qixing when he participated in the recruitment competition 3 years ago. Regardless of whether he was stronger or weaker, in terms of cultivation, he was one stage lower than Xiong Qixing at the same age. Therefore, even if Yixing was unparalleled in the limelight, it was still difficult for him to truly hold his head high in comparison to Xiong Qixing. On the other hand, although Wei Qingxuan's cultivation was one stage lower than Xiong Qixing's, she was still very young. She was only a little over 14 years old. At this age, with this level of cultivation and this level of strength, it was truly shocking. If Wei Qingxian reached the age when Xiong Qixing participated in the recruitment competition, her cultivation would definitely not be below Xiong Qixing's. With Wei Qingxuan's current strength, if her cultivation was not weaker than Xiong Qixing's, her strength would definitely surpass his by a large margin. In comparison, Xiong Qixing was practically worthless in front of Wei Qingxian. In every aspect, he was trampled by Wei Qingxian. In the distance, Tyrannical Bear looked at the Fame Monument with an ashen face and a gloomy expression. His eyes concealed a shocking amount of fury and killing intent. Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian had actually left their names higher on the fame monument than Xiong Qixing's. In fact, it was far higher than his. This result was hard for Tyrannical Bear to accept. Wei Qingxian was just a girl. Once she entered the Purple Mountain Academy, with Xiong Qixing's status as the vice principal's disciple, he could definitely use the method of marriage to bring Wei Qingxian to the Xiong clan. He believed that the Wei clan would not refuse. Even if they refused, he could use Xiong Qixing's master to pressure them and forcefully bring Wei Qingxian over. However, Yi Xing was different. Yi Xing was a man. It was impossible to tie him to the Xiong clan through marriage. As for letting Yi Xing marry into the Xiong clan, Tyrannical Bear had never thought of it. Not to mention that it was impossible, just the fact that Yi Xing was Xiong Qicai's murderer meant that the Xiong clan's attitude towards Yi Xing could only be to kill him. Azure Sky City, Xiong clan's main hall. As soon as the recruitment competition ended, Tyrannical Bear brought his men back to the Xiong clan. Then, he gathered with the other two martial Dao masters of the Xiong clan and some elders of the 6th stage of the martial Dao. Tyrannical Bear did not go to watch the recruitment competition. When he found out about Yi Xing's performance in the recruitment competition and how he had surpassed Xiong Qixing on the fame monument, he flew into a rage. I can't let this little bastard go to the Purple Mountain Academy. I want him dead. I want him dead. Tyrannical Bear roared furiously. In Azure Sky City, he was a big shot in the 7th stage of the martial Dao. However, in front of the Purple Mountain Academy, a martial Dao master like him was not even worth mentioning. If Yi Xing entered the Purple Mountain Academy, Tyrannical Bear would not be able to touch a single hair on Yi Xing's head. Moreover, the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class was known as the cradle of martial Dao masters. It could even nurture martial Dao masters and martial grandmasters. If Yi Xing had some achievements in the genius class, Tyrannical Bear would not be able to take Yi Xing's life for the rest of his life. Instead, he would have to guard against Yi Xing. Therefore, Tyrannical Bear could not wait to kill Yi Xing. He could not let Yi Xing enter the Purple Mountain Academy. Facing Tyrannical Bear's anger, the elders of the Xiong clan remained silent. Although Yi Xing was Tyrannical Bear's son, the Xiong clan had a great hatred for Yi Xing. Who didn't want Yi Xing to die? However, the problem was that killing Yi Xing was not an easy task. Tyrannical Bear waved his hand to stop Tyrannical Bear's agitation, saying, "Who doesn't want Yi Xing to die? But he has already been accepted into the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class by Mu Feng. Who can touch him? Not to mention a genius class student, even if a common class student died, the Purple Mountain Academy would not sit idly by." Although the Xiong clan was Azure Sky City's #1 martial Dao family, if they dared to kill a Purple Mountain Academy student, not only would the murderer be executed, Tyrannical Bear, the patriarch of the Xiong clan, would also suffer a great calamity. Tyrannical Bear suppressed the anger in his heart, saying, "If I secretly assassinate him, without any evidence, who would dare to blame my Xiong clan?" Tyrannical Bear shook his head, saying, "The Ya clan's defense is tight, what assassination is there to talk about?" Tyrannical Bear said sternly, "After being accepted as a student of the Purple Mountain Academy, he won't be able to return for a long time. Before he goes to the academy, he has 3 days to visit his family. Yi Xing is a member of the Ya clan in Greenleaf Village. He will definitely return to Greenleaf Village. I will ambush him on the way. I will definitely be able to kill him." Tyrannical Bear pondered for a moment, then shook his head again, saying, "No, Yi Xing's Qigong and movement technique have been trained to perfection. His ability to escape is definitely first class. If he escapes, even if you are a martial Dao master, you will have a hard time catching up. If you fail to kill him and the matter is exposed, not only will your life be over, even the entire Xiong clan will suffer a calamity." Tyrannical Bear was impatient to kill Yi Xing. Clearly, he didn't think as much as Tyrannical Bear, the patriarch of the Xiong clan. Tyrannical Bear said, "Since I want to kill him, I naturally have to make sure that he can't escape. Moreover, even if something happens and he escapes, I will directly escape from Celestial Azure City. What can the Purple Mountain Academy do to me?" With Xiong Qixing's relationship in the Purple Mountain Academy, and that little bastard is not dead, the Purple Mountain Academy will definitely not make things difficult for the Xiong clan. If I really kill that little bastard, then it will be a bloodbath. Without evidence, who can blame my Xiong clan? Tyrannical Bear's mind recalled the recruitment competition and Mu Fang's gaze when he looked at him. He couldn't help but shudder. He was certain that if Yi Xing was assassinated, Mu Feng would definitely not let it go. Even if there was no evidence, as long as he suspected the Xiong clan, he would probably come knocking on their door. Tyrannical Bear shook his head again and said, "This is not appropriate. Bear, you must not bring trouble to yourself. If you want to kill Yi Xing, you must think of a proper reason. Even if people know that my Xiong clan killed him, they won't be able to blame my Xiong clan." Tyrannical Bear said angrily, "He killed my son. I killed him to avenge my son. Isn't that a proper reason?" Tyrannical Bear frowned and said unhappily, "Mu Feng is only in charge of recruiting students. He doesn't care about the hatred between you and Yi Xing unless you can make Yi Xing and you have an open life and death duel. Mu Feng will definitely not let it go if you kill him. Bear, your mind has been blinded by killing intent. You only know how to kill without caring about the consequences. Go back and rest first and calm your heart." Tyrannical Bear didn't intend to leave. At this time, a 6th-level elder said, "Patriarch, when you mentioned a life and death duel, I thought of something. Perhaps we can kill Yi Xing in a proper way." Everyone's eyes lit up at the same time. Before Tyrannical Bear could speak, Tyrannical Bear had already asked, "Elder Xiong, what method is there to kill him?" Xiong, an elder of the Xiong clan, came from a branch of the Xiong clan. His cultivation was at the peak of the 6th level. Xiong said, "Everyone knows that I have a sworn enemy. He is the Ya family's elder, Yi Xing Yi Tianan, and I came from a branch of the Ya family in Greenleaf Village. Coincidentally, he is Yi Xing's grandfather." Xiong said a few words but didn't get to the main point. Tyrannical Bear anxiously asked, "What does this have to do with killing Yi Xing in a proper way?" Xiong stroked his beard and smiled, "Hee. 10 years ago, Yi Tianan and I agreed to a life and death duel 10 years later. Unfortunately, Yi Tianan was a short-lived ghost. He passed away 3 years ago. Originally, with Yi Tianan's death, I abandoned this duel, but..." Xiong voice changed. "If you want Yi Xing's life, I can continue to mention this duel." At that time, Yi Tianan used the name of the head of the Ya family in Greenleaf Village to fight with the head of the Xiong family in Wuyang Town. Even if Yi Tianan died, I insisted on fighting. The current head of the Ya family had no choice but to accept the challenge. Xiong said with a sly smile, "The current head of the Ya family is Yi Xing's father. If Yi Xing doesn't want his father to die, he can only fight in his father's place. In a life and death duel, I will kill Yi Xing. It is a matter of course. The Purple Mountain Academy cannot blame me." Tyrannical Bear heard this and laughed. "In a life and death duel, Yi Xing cannot escape. With Elder Xiong strength, it is enough to kill Yi Xing. Good, this is a feasible plan. Reminder, 1 chapter in the morning, 1 chapter in the evening. It is not easy to have 2 chapters. Moreover, the story in Azure Sky City is about to end. The story in Purple Mountain Academy is about to begin. The difficulty is a bit high. Writing is tiring. There is no time to update the first chapter in the morning. Chapter 78. Azure Sky City, Yeah Family. When Yixing was recruited into the Purple Mountain Academy's genius class, the Yeah family celebrated. Only at night did Yixing return to his residence. Although it was said to be a celebration, it wasn't. There were always some people who hated Yixing's glory. In the darkness, in the shadows, there was always a pair of eagle-like eyes staring at Yixing. Their eyes contained deep hatred. Yixing, if you don't die, even if this old man enters the grave in the future, I won't be able to rest in peace. Yi Weiniang's heart was filled with hatred for Yixing. First, Yi Weiniang suspected that Yixing had killed Yi Yunkong in the Azure Sky Mountain Range. At first, it was only a suspicion, but after a long time, it became a fact in his heart. Second, Yi Weiniang had been heavily injured by Yixing in front of everyone. As an elder of the family, he had lost all face. These two reasons made Yi Weiniang hate Yixing so much that he wanted to die. Yixing had already noticed Yi Weiniang's secret stares. With the super brain scan, it was clear as day. Yixing didn't put Yi Weiniang in his heart. Although he hated Yixing, he was still an elder of the family. As long as Yi Weiniang didn't provoke him, Yixing couldn't be bothered to care about him. Yi Feng, tomorrow morning, go to the martial arts hall and challenge the top 10 ordinary disciples. After you become a disciple of the martial arts hall, take a leave and come back to Greenleaf Village with me. In his residence, Yixing instructed Yi Feng. Counting the time, it had already been over 3 months since he and Yi Feng left Greenleaf Village and arrived at Azure Sky City. Going to the Indigo Mountain Academy to study, he wouldn't be able to return to Azure Sky City for a long period of time. Therefore, Yixing took advantage of the 3 days of family visit before going to the Indigo Mountain Academy to make a trip back to Greenleaf Village, bringing Yi Feng along with him. Although his feelings for Yi Feihong and Louis were very faint, Greenleaf Village was, after all, the place where he first came to the Star Continent. Moreover, he had taken over the body of Yi Feihong's son after all. During this period of time in Celestial Azure City, some of the dissatisfaction he had towards Yi Feihong and Louis had already faded with time. Before he left Celestial Azure City, it was only right for him to go back and visit them. After Yi Feng left, Yixing did not rest. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and started cultivating the Qingyuan art. Today's continuous battles, especially the battle with Wei Qingxian, gave Yixing a lot of benefits. Not only did his martial skill attainment increase greatly, the internal energy in his body was also greatly tempered, and there was a tendency for his cultivation to rise. Yixing wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to raise his cultivation to the peak of the 5th layer tonight. Yixing had already cultivated the Qingyuan art to the 3rd layer, opening 12 meridians in his body, and cultivating his internal energy at a remarkable speed. In a mere 4 hours, Yixing's cultivation had successfully reached the peak of the 5th layer. Once he reached this realm, he would be able to consolidate his cultivation to the peak of the 5th layer in a short period of time, rushing towards the peak of the 6th layer of the martial path. Yixing was very confident. His astrology was extraordinary, and he cultivated the Qingyuan art, a high-grade cultivation technique. Breaking through to the 6th layer of the martial path was definitely not a difficult matter. It was only a matter of time. The night passed in silence. The next day, Yi Feng did not go to the cafeteria to chop firewood. Instead, he went to the martial arts hall to challenge the disciples there. Yi Feng's cultivation had already reached the peak of the 4th layer of the Heavenly Monarch realm. Furthermore, he had mastered a mid-tier body refinement technique and a full mastery low-tier martial skill. With his strength, he could easily challenge the elite disciples. Challenging the top 10 ordinary disciples was a piece of cake. For such a small matter, Yixing did not join in the fun. Instead, he went to the Yi clan's weapon shop in Azure Sky City and bought a 3-cauldron strong bow, the dragon tendon bow, as well as a quiver of black edge arrows. The dragon tendon bow had a resounding name, but it was not a bow made of real dragon tendons. Instead, it was made of the tendons of high-level vicious beasts, and coupled with high-grade treasure metal, its power was extremely terrifying. The strength of one cauldron was 1,200 gene. The strength of 3 cauldrons was 1,600 gene. The 3 cauldron strong bow was not something that an average person could use. There were many martial artists below the 7th level who could pull the 3 cauldron strong bow, but those who could use the 3 cauldron strong bow to kill enemies were few and far between. One arrow with 1,600 gene of strength had a terrifying penetrative power. Even a 7th layer martial Dao master would be moved, and for a 6th layer martial artist, it was definitely a fatal blow. Especially the black edge arrows that came with the dragon tendon bow. They were also made of high-grade treasure metal, sturdy, sharp, and a type of killing weapon. In the Yi clan's weapon shop, the dragon tendon bow was already the highest grade treasure bow, worth hundreds of thousands of silvers. However, Yi Xing, as a student of the Purple Mountain Academy's gifted class, had an extraordinary status in the Yi clan. Naturally, he only needed to buy it at the original price, which was 40% cheaper. Becoming a student of the gifted class allowed Yi Xing to receive a large amount of clan contribution points as a reward. He used a portion of the contribution points to buy the dragon tendon bow, not even spending a single silver. By the time Yi Xing returned with the dragon tendon bow and black edge arrows, Yi Feng had already become a disciple of the martial arts hall. When Yi Feng arrived at the martial arts hall, he directly challenged the number 1 ordinary disciple. He won the battle and became the new number 1 ordinary disciple. In addition, he was Yi Xing's cousin, so he was in the limelight among the ordinary disciples. How could such a person continue to chop firewood in the cafeteria? Naturally, he was accepted into the martial arts hall and focused on nurturing. Yi Feng asked the martial arts hall master for leave and returned to Qingye village with Yi Xing. The martial arts hall master naturally agreed without a second word. At noon, Yi Xing and Yi Feng each took a horse from the family and left the Ya family, heading towards Qingye village. When they came from Qingye village, they took a carriage and walked on the main road. It took them a day to reach Azure Sky City. Yi Xing only had a total of 3 days to visit his family. Naturally, he didn't want to waste time on the road. He directly urged his horse forward and walked on the small roads. It only took them less than 4 hours to reach Qingye village. Not long after they left the Ya family, Yi Xing discovered that someone was secretly following them from afar. It was Yi Weining. Yi Weining was also riding a horse and was about 4 to 5 li away from Yi Xing and Yi Feng. Yi Feng naturally didn't notice the figure that was almost a black dot in the distance. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to recognize who it was. It wasn't the other party, but someone who was following them. But Yi Xing's gaze could see Yi Weining clearly from afar. Yi Xing stroked the dragon tendon bow and the corner of his mouth curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. From the looks of it, Yi Weining seemed to be plotting something against him. This made Yi Xing happy instead of worried. He didn't like Yi Weining, but the other party was an elder of the family. Yi Xing couldn't be bothered to deal with him. However, if the other party took the initiative to offend him, then it would be exactly what Yi Xing wanted. It would be perfectly justifiable for him to get rid of him. Brother Xing, I'm afraid that everyone in Qingye village didn't expect that you would have today's glory. Hee, when they know that you've become the number 1 person in the younger generation of the Yi clan and have been accepted as a student of the Purple Mountain Academy's gifted class, how will they react? Yi Feng urged his horse forward and walked side by side with Yi Xing. He was very excited and also very happy. He excitedly laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha. I can imagine how shocked they will be, especially the head elder. He thought that Yi Qing would have great prospects in the main family and would surpass you. But in the end, he became a good-for-nothing. He can't even compare to Brother Xing's shoes. Yi Xing faintly smiled. Yifeng's words were all true. He wasn't deliberately flattering him. He thought of his own changes in the past 3 months and his heart was also very happy. Now that he was urging his horse forward, his heart was even more carefree. It was a kind of pleasure of traveling through the Jianghu. This kind of feeling, on Earth, could only be found in novels and fantasy worlds. But the feeling was far from being as intense as experiencing it in person. Looking at the smiling and happy Yifeng, Yixing laughed and said, "Hee. Yiqing is now very far away from you. If they knew that you've already become the number one of the Yi clan's ordinary disciples, TSK, they would also be shocked." Yixing's words touched the excitement in Yifeng's heart. His smile instantly became 10 times brighter. Thinking of how he had become outstanding in the main family and how carefree he would be when he returned and how his parents would be proud of him, Yifeng was naturally very excited and couldn't contain his joy. However, no matter how excited and happy he was, Yifeng would never forget who had made him who he was today. Yifeng stopped laughing and said, "This is all thanks to Brother Xing's nurturing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be where I am today." Yixing said, "This is all I can help you with. Your future achievements will still depend on your own efforts." Yifeng nodded vigorously and said, "Yes. I will definitely work hard and follow Brother Xing's example to make a name for myself in Tiansang City." Yixing smiled and looked back again. He looked into the distance and found that Yi Weiniang had disappeared. Not long after, Yixing looked back again and still didn't find Yi Weiniang. This made him feel a little strange. In the following period of time, Yixing looked back many times, but Yi Weiniang didn't appear again. Yixing was basically sure that Yi Weiniang didn't continue to follow them. Otherwise, Yi Weiniang wouldn't know that he could look into the distance and wouldn't hide when he looked back. This made Yixing feel a little regretful. Taking the small path from Tiansang City back to Qingye village, they mostly walked through the mountains. After 2 hours, Yixing and Yifeng had already covered 2/3 of the distance. At this time, he had the feeling that he was being watched. Yixing looked back and didn't find anything strange. Then, he looked in all directions and even scanned a radius of several hundred meters. He still didn't find anything that was watching him. This made Yixing feel strange, but he soon realized something and raised his head to look at the sky. In the sky behind him, Yixing finally found the thing that was watching him. It was a fierce bird with a wingspan of more than 50 feet. Yixing had ridden on a flying bird before and immediately reacted. There must be a martial artist riding on this fierce bird. Otherwise, why would the other party's gaze be locked on him from afar when he had no enmity with this fierce bird? Yifeng saw Yixing looking back at the sky with a strange expression. He also looked back and asked, "What's wrong, Brother Xing?" He couldn't see as far as Yixing. He could only see that there seemed to be a black dot in the sky. It should be a flying bird. "Yifeng, I'm afraid we're in trouble. This fierce bird is controlled by a martial artist. It should be coming for us." Yixing signaled Yifeng to stop. No matter how fast a horse ran, it couldn't be faster than a flying bird. Chapter 79. When the two of them stopped, the raptor in the air caught up to them. What a huge raptor! The raptor grew bigger in Yifeng's eyes, and he couldn't help but exclaim. Yixing had ridden on Brother He before, and it was much bigger than this raptor. He wasn't surprised as his attention was on the raptor's back. However, he couldn't see the raptor's back right now. Without a certain distance, Yixing couldn't scan it either. This isn't an eagle. It's a green-winged eagle, a high-level raptor that's equivalent to a rank 7 martial Dao master. Yixing said as he looked into the distance and saw the ferocious bird clearly. Yifeng sucked in a breath of cold air. In Tiansang City, martial Dao masters were the strongest. They were extremely powerful. Just this green-winged eagle was equivalent to a martial Dao master, and Yixing said that there was a martial artist on its back. Wouldn't that be even more terrifying than the green-winged eagle? Seeing the green-winged eagle getting bigger and closer, as if it was swooping down on the two of them, Yifeng exclaimed, "It's coming for us." At this moment, the green-winged eagle had entered Yixing's super brain scanning range. In an instant, Yixing scanned the entire body of the green-winged eagle into his super brain. There was indeed a martial artist on the back of the green-winged eagle. This martial artist's face was covered with a black cloth, and he was also wearing black tight-fitting clothes. He was short and strong, and he was lying on the back of the green-winged eagle. If Yixing didn't scan with his super brain, it would be hard for the green-winged eagle to notice him even if it was right in front of him. Although the black cloth was covering his face, it was useless under Yixing's super brain scanning. Not only did Yixing see this person's appearance, but even his martial Dao cultivation was clearly scanned by Yixing. Yixing had never seen a 7th-level martial Dao master before. A martial Dao master that they had never seen before, with his face covered, rode a high-level green-winged eagle and deliberately chased after them. Moreover, he controlled the green-winged eagle to swoop down towards Yixing. No matter how they looked at it, this person was not a friendly person. The green-winged eagle was equivalent to a 7th-level martial Dao master. When it swooped down from the sky, its power was terrifying. Even a martial Dao master would not be able to withstand its diving power. If the blue-winged eagle was allowed to dive down, Yixing and Lin Yun would most likely become ghosts under its talons. Yixing dismounted in an instant, the dragon tendon bow in his hand. At the same time, he took out a black-edged arrow and shouted, "Who are you? If you dare to come any closer, don't blame me for killing you with one arrow." Yixing did not recklessly fire his arrows before he could confirm that the other party was an enemy. On the green-winged eagle, the masked man chuckled in disdain. He controlled the green-winged eagle to increase its diving speed. Obviously, he did not believe that an arrow shot by a 5th-level martial Dao realm martial artist could threaten the high-level green-winged eagle. The other party's actions made Yixing judge that the other party was not playing around. They really wanted to kill him and Yifeng. Whoosh! Yixing no longer hesitated. The black-edged arrow instantly left the bowstring and shot out. The current Yixing was not like in the hunting competition, when he was chased by Xiong Bao Tian and had to rely on calculations to be able to injure the other party. The current Yixing was not the same as before. Not only was his cultivation higher, his internal strength was more vigorous, the bow in his hand was also much stronger, and he had also comprehended a trace of wind force. With a bow and arrow in hand, even if he faced a martial Dao master head-on, he was not afraid at all. The power of the black-edged arrow that left the bowstring was terrifying. The sound of it breaking through the air was ear-piercing. Moreover, the black-edged arrow had a trace of wind force fused into it, causing the speed of the arrow to almost double, reaching an inconceivable level. Facing this arrow, the black-clothed man on the green-winged eagle was slightly surprised. Yixing's archery skills had somewhat exceeded his expectations. In that instant, the green-winged eagle under him opened its mouth and spat out a wind blade. Although the black-edged arrow was fast, it was still a straight line. The wind blade spat out by the green-winged eagle accurately blocked the black-edged arrow. However, the power contained in the black-edged arrow was extremely strong. It was far from what the wind blade could compare to. The wind blade was instantly shattered, but the black-edged arrow's power did not decrease as it directly shot towards the green-winged eagle's throat. At that moment, the green-winged eagle's eyes revealed a look of great shock. The black-clothed man on the eagle's back also suddenly changed his expression. The power of this arrow was not just a little bit beyond his expectations. It was unknown how much stronger it was than what he had expected. It actually made the green-winged eagle feel the threat of death and had a frightened reaction. As a bird, the green-winged eagle's reaction speed in the air was even faster than a martial Dao master of the 7th stage. At the critical moment, it changed direction and its body tilted, flying to the side like lightning. Even so, the blue-winged eagle only managed to avoid being hit in its throat. Its body still couldn't avoid being killed by the arrow. However, its sharp claws had already reached out the moment it turned its body. Before the black-edge arrow could enter its body, its sharp claws collided with the tip of the arrow. Ding! The crisp sound of metal colliding rang out as the black-edge arrow was knocked away by the claw. However, the green-winged eagle let out a cry. Its sturdy claws were dripping with blood. A large part of it had been damaged by the black-edge arrow. When the green-winged eagle was injured, the martial Dao master on the eagle's back was furious. He shouted, "How dare you hurt my eagle? Later, I'll let my eagle peck your flesh bit by bit and eat you." As he shouted, the green-winged eagle was controlled. It once again turned in the air and continued to rush towards Yixing and Yifeng. At this moment, Yixing's dragon tendon bow had already knocked 3 black-edge arrows. He coldly snorted and said, "Then I'll kill this beast first." Whoosh! 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 As he spoke, 3 black-edge arrows left the bowstring and pierced through the air, drawing 3 distorted trajectories in the air. The perfect revolving arrow technique. Moreover, it also incorporated a trace of wind force, causing the arrows to be more accurate, more variable, and faster. The first arrow was only Yixing's test. These 3 arrows were the real killing move. Your archery has actually reached such a level. At this moment, the martial Dao master on the eagle's back finally let out a shocked exclamation. In front of such a terrifying archery technique, the ferocious bird flying in the air was completely a live target. There was no way to dodge or block. The masked man used all his strength to pull the green-winged eagle to the side. The green-winged eagle also exploded its speed to the limit in an instant and dodged to the side. At the same time, it stretched out its claws and flapped its huge wings, trying to block the 3 arrows with distorted trajectories. Unfortunately, the 3 arrows shot at the same time could not be blocked no matter how hard it tried. Only one of the sharp arrows was luckily blocked by the green-winged eagle's claws, but it also shot a terrible wound on its claws. As for the other 2 arrows, they mysteriously bypassed the obstruction. One arrow hit the wing of the green-winged condor, while the other hit the heart below its body. The black-edge arrow, which contained terrifying power, easily penetrated the green-winged eagle's fur and entered deep into its flesh. Its heart was completely penetrated, and its body instantly fell from the sky. Eagle! The masked man cried out involuntarily. It was not easy to tame a ferocious bird, especially a high-level one. Whether it was traveling or killing enemies, it was very useful. The reason he was able to catch up with Yixing and Yifeng was because of this green-winged eagle. However, before he even landed, the green-winged eagle had already been shot to death by Yixing. The masked man was incomparably furious. If he had known that Yixing's archery was so terrifying, he would not have swooped down on the green-winged eagle and become a live target for Yixing. Instead, he would have rushed ahead in advance and prepared an ambush to assassinate him. As an assassin, it was reasonable to take the enemy by surprise and kill in the dark. However, because the target was only a martial artist of the 5th stage of the martial Dao, the masked man thought that it would be easy to kill him. As a result, he underestimated the enemy and committed the biggest taboo of assassins, resulting in such a serious consequence. Although the masked man cried out, "Eagle," he had no extra time to care about the green-winged eagle now. As the green-winged eagle died and fell from the sky, the masked man also lost his balance and fell downwards. The masked man was about 20 feet from the ground. At this height, even if he was a martial Dao master with a middle-ranked Qin Gong and a high-ranked Qin Gong, he would not be able to safely and quickly land. If he wanted to land safely, he would have to use the green-winged eagle's corpse to use his Qin Gong to reduce the speed of his fall. However, in this way, he would become a live target for Yi Xing. How could Yi Xing let go of this opportunity? In the blink of an eye, another 3 black edge arrows were knocked on the bowstring and 3 more arrows were released simultaneously. Even if the masked man was on the ground, it would be difficult for him to block or dodge Yi Xing's 3 arrows, let alone in the air where there was almost no resistance. In an instant, the masked man was in a desperate situation. Bang! Bang! As the masked man fell, he desperately waved the dagger in his hand. Cold light flashed, but he could only block 2 arrows. There was another arrow that turned around and shot towards him from behind. In the blink of an eye, it had reached his back. If I die, you won't live either. The masked man had no time to block or dodge the 3rd arrow. He let out a roar and threw the dagger in his hand at Yi Xing. The dagger left his hand and shot out like a flying dagger, bringing along with it a bright inner strength. Although the power of the weapon was not small, the attack range was limited and could not reach the range of an arrow. When the dagger flew to the front of Yi Xing, the sharpness of the internal force had already dimmed and there was no more power left in the dagger. Yi Xing held the bow in one hand and used the mountain-splitting palm with the other. With a move of the Monkey King's stone splitting, the dagger fell to the ground. At this moment, the 3rd arrow had already pierced through the masked man's body. Even though the masked man's mid-tier body refining technique had reached perfection and his inner strength was abundant, he still could not stop the arrow from piercing through his body. The Dark Knight will not let you go. The masked man's body fell rapidly from the air. Before he took his last breath, he saw Yi Xing block the dagger and shouted unwillingly. The masked man's body fell to the ground with a bang. Yi Feng, who was dumbfounded, came to his senses. Yi Feng looked at Yi Xing, who was holding the dragon tendon bow, with an incredulous expression. He stuttered, Brother Xing, you killed a high-level ferocious bird and a martial Dao master. Chapter 80. Yi Feng knew very well what a martial Dao master meant in Tiansang City. A 7th-grade martial Dao master was definitely someone who stood at the pinnacle of martial arts in Tiansang City. The reason why the Yi, Wei, and Xiong families were above all the other martial arts families in Tiansang City was because only the 3 families had 7th-grade martial Dao masters. Even though Yi Feng admired Yi Xing, he had never imagined that Yi Xing would be able to compete with a 7th-grade martial Dao master. However, right in front of Yi Feng's eyes, Yi Xing had killed a green-winged eagle that was equivalent to a martial Dao master. He had even killed a genuine martial Dao master. Yi Feng could tell that the masked man was indeed a 7th-level martial Dao master from the dagger that was thrown by the masked man at the end and the sharp internal force that came out of his body. Compared to Yi Feng's shock, Yi Xing's expression was natural and calm as usual. With the dragon tendon bow in hand, Yi Xing had an extraordinary confidence in his heart. Although he had never killed a martial Dao master before, when he drew the bow and faced the green-winged eagle's dive, he already had full confidence in his heart that he could kill it. This confidence came from his bone marrow, from his archery skills, and from the powerful dragon tendon bow in his hand. Yi Xing smiled faintly and said, I was only able to kill it because of the advantage of the bow and arrow. If it was a head-on battle, whether it was the green-winged eagle or the masked man, I wouldn't be a match for them. Although Yi Xing said it casually, Yi Feng was still shocked. He looked at Yi Xing as if he was looking at a freak, a demon. Originally, Yi Xing's image in Yi Feng's heart was already high enough. However, today, he had broken the record again and became even higher. For the first time, a thought appeared in Yi Feng's mind. What kind of martial Dao achievements would Yi Xing achieve in the future? It was probably something he couldn't even imagine. I don't know what Dark Knight stands for, but I can be sure that this masked man is an assassin who came to kill me. Perhaps Dark Knight is the code name of an even stronger assassin? Or is it the name of the assassin's organization? Yixing pondered as he walked towards the masked man's corpse. I wonder who hired the assassin, Yi Weining. Or was it the Xiong family? This person was able to accurately identify me from a distance. He should have a portrait of me on him, and it's very likely that the person who hired him to kill me provided the portrait. Yixing's eyes revealed a sharp light. No matter who hired the assassin, he had already sentenced the other party to death in his heart. Sure enough, Yixing found something useful on the masked man. On a piece of cloth, not only was his appearance drawn, there was also a map of his route from Tianzong City back to Greenleaf Village, as well as the estimated time of departure and arrival. Moreover, it was specially stated that Yixing wasn't traveling alone, but was traveling with a young man called Yi Feng on a horse. It was very easy to identify. At the bottom of the cloth, there was also a price. The reward for killing Yixing was 1 million taels of silver. Half of it was paid up front, and the other half after the deed was done. The murderous light in Yixing's eyes intensified. Looking at this cloth, he was already sure that Yi Weining was the person who hired the assassin. The reason why Yi Weining secretly followed him out of Tianzong City was to confirm his route back to Greenleaf Village. After confirming that Yixing was taking a small path, he didn't continue to follow him. He drew this route and then handed it to the assassin's organization. The reason why he was sure it was Yi Weining was because only Yi Weining knew their route, as well as the estimated time of departure and arrival. Yi Weining, the day I return to Tianzong City is the day you die. Yixing kept the cloth. Although there was no name on it, it was still strong evidence. The picture and handwriting on it should all be his own handwriting. This kind of thing was naturally best kept to himself. He couldn't borrow the hands of others. Yixing's current status was not only the #1 elite of the Yi clan's younger generation, he was also a student of the Zishan Academy's genius class. With this cloth in hand, even if Yi Weining was an elder of the Yi clan, Yixing would still kill him. I'll let you live for 2 days. Yixing said in his heart. Since they were about to reach Greenleaf Village, Yixing naturally returned to Greenleaf Village first. As for Yi Weining, he definitely didn't expect the assassin to fail. As an elder of the Yi clan, he couldn't run away. On the masked man's body, Yixing also found 50 banknotes worth 10,000 taels of silver. It should be the reward that Yi Weining paid in advance. After dealing with the corpses of the blue-winged eagle and the masked man, Yixing took the cloth, the 500,000 taels of silver, and the high-grade dagger left behind by the masked man. He and Yi Feng continued towards Greenleaf Village. Because of the delay, they arrived at Greenleaf Village later than expected. It was already close to dusk. Normally at this time, the Ya family in Greenleaf Village would be very quiet. There wouldn't be too many people walking around. But today was different. The entire Ya family, from top to bottom, all the members of the Ya family were gathered outside the Yi residence, looking forward to what would happen. Greenleaf Village was more than 100 li away from Azure Sky City. In addition to the changing roads, the distance was even further, making travel inconvenient. Moreover, the main Ya family wouldn't purposely send news of Yixing to Greenleaf Village. Therefore, although Yixing was very well known in the main Ya family, the branch family of Greenleaf Village didn't know about him. However, Yixing was accepted as a student of the Purple Mountain Academy's gifted class. For the main Ya family, this was a joyous event that hadn't happened for many years. Compared to Yixing becoming the #1 elite disciple of the Ya family, this was 10 times more important. Therefore, today, the main Ya family purposely sent a messenger pigeon to inform the Ya family of the good news. They also stated that Yixing would return to Greenleaf Village today to visit his relatives. Although Yixing taking first place in the Greenleaf Village clan meeting was very surprising to the Ya family, they also didn't expect that Yixing would also be so well known in the main Ya family. When they received the news from the main family's messenger pigeon, Yi Feihong was shocked, Lu Yi was shocked, and then, all the elders were shocked. In the end, everyone in the entire Yi family was shocked. In Greenleaf Village, Yi Feihong's peak 5th rank cultivation was the strongest martial artist. Many people who practice martial arts hadn't even stepped into the 4th rank of martial arts and became a true martial artist. To the martial artists of Greenleaf Village, the main Ya family, the Wei family, and the Xiong family of Celestial Azure City were all super powerful forces. Martial masters were existences that they couldn't even look up to. However, there was always a chance to go to Celestial Azure City to take a look. As for the Purple Mountain County City, it was basically a once-in-a-lifetime visit. The Purple Mountain Academy was a place that could only be heard of in legends. But today, the Ya family of Greenleaf Village actually produced someone who could enter the Purple Mountain Academy. How could the entire Ya family not be shocked to the point of being dumbstruck? The most shocking thing was that Yi Xing had entered the gifted class. And it was rumored that in the gifted class of the Purple Mountain Academy, there was a chance to meet Zishan Ho, the legendary martial saint. Meeting the martial saint. This was something that the martial artists of Greenleaf Village didn't dare to imagine. Of course, they couldn't imagine that in reality, Yi Xing had already met the martial saint. Moreover, he had even spoken with the martial saint before. He had even ridden a martial saint-level ferocious bird with the martial saint. After a long time, the members of the Ya family of Greenleaf Village finally recovered from their shock. In the hearts of Yi Feihong and Lu Yi, they were both incomparably happy and deeply remorseful. Yi Xing was the trash of a son that was abandoned by the two of them. Yet today, he had such a promising future. Compared to the number one genius of the Ya family of Greenleaf Village, Yi Xing, he was far superior. After the shock, lamentation, and self-reproach, Yi Feihong immediately gathered the management of the Ya family and held a family meeting. Everyone in the Yi residence, listen to my orders. Use your fastest speed to clean up the entire Yi residence. Especially Yi Xing's room, it must be cleaned until it looks brand new. After cleaning, all members of the Ya family are to head out of the residence to welcome the first student of the Purple Mountain Academy in the history of our Greenleaf Village's Ya family. After being busy for half a day, the entire Ya family was cleaned up. Then, the members of the Ya family began to wait outside the residence for the return of the most outstanding martial artist in the history of Greenleaf Village's Ya family. As for the servants of the Ya family, they were still finishing up the cleaning. Left and right. After waiting for an entire afternoon, Yi Xing still hadn't returned. If it was an ordinary person, there would have been people who would have been impatient by now. However, today, there wasn't anyone who was impatient. Yi Xing's achievements had caused the members of the Ya family of Greenleaf Village to be convinced of his strength. All that was left was admiration and worship. Even the first elder, after hearing the news, no longer had the slightest bit of hatred towards Yi Xing. Instead, there was only shock and reverence. For Greenleaf Village to have such a person, it was the blessing of the entire Greenleaf Village's Ya family. From today onwards, the Ya family of Greenleaf Village would definitely soar to the skies. All of the clansmen would benefit from this. They were only a little anxious in their hearts. Why hadn't Yi Xing returned yet? It wasn't until evening that Yi Xing and Yi Feng rode side by side and appeared in the Ya family's line of sight. The anxiety of the Ya family members immediately disappeared and their expressions turned into great joy. Yi Xing! Yi Xing! Yi Xing! Many of the younger generation of the Ya family loudly shouted. A few months ago, they still looked down on Yi Xing and regarded Yi Xing as trash. But now, Yi Xing's height was really too high for them to reach. They couldn't even be jealous of him. Their hearts were only filled with admiration and admiration. Yi Feng is also back. Yi Fighting, who was originally overjoyed, saw Yi Feng and Yi Xing appear at the same time. His eyes lit up again. Looking at the Ya family in front of him and listening to the cheers of the Ya family's younger generation, the scene was like welcoming a triumphant return of a hero. Yixing felt a sense of pride in his heart. Although these people didn't like him in the past, the main reason at that time was because Yixing was indeed unable to cultivate. Now, they were still them and hadn't changed. However, Yixing had undergone earth-shattering changes. Their attitude towards Yixing had undergone a 180-degree change. They saw Yixing as the glory of the Ya family in Greenleaf Village and were proud of Yixing. They couldn't be said to be good or bad. They were just ordinary people. In this world, it was impossible for everyone to know you through life and death. Therefore, it was normal for people to be looked down upon when they were lowly and respected when they were high. Therefore, even though Yixing had bad memories of the Ya family in Greenleaf Village, it didn't affect Yixing's feelings towards the Ya family in Greenleaf Village. Greenleaf Village was his first stop after coming to the Star Continent. It was the starting point of his second life. Yixing didn't hate them in his heart. He only hoped that the Ya family in Greenleaf Village would get better and better. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.